The blood on the imaging report wasn't real, but the surgery was. Simone Carter is 29, a Black American woman, chief surgical safety nurse at Miran Hospital in Seoul. Royal blue scrubs, white coat, steady hands. She catches a double dose before it reaches a vein. The chief surgeon leans close and tells her to look away. She doesn't. Then a young patient collapses mid-rehearsal, and the paperwork ordering an emergency operation doesn't add up. Wrong timestamps, a signature that was never signed, labs that vanished. Simone cancels the transfer. A hand comes across her face in front of the whole floor. The doors open. A man in a fitted charcoal suit walks in. Luxury watch, dark shirt, a sea dragon tattoo rising past his collar. Kang Min-jae, the Snow Wolf, boss of the Haryong clan. The girl on that table is his sister. He looks at Simone's cheek. Then he looks at the man who touched it. Who slapped the nurse? A nurse who follows the rules. A mafia boss who breaks them. One sedated girl between them who never needed surgery at all. But what Simone found in those samples was never meant to be seen. Before starting the story, comment down below where you are watching from and what time it is there. If stories of karma, love, and hidden truths move you, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a member and help our channel. Simone caught the syringe before the plunger went down. Her hand closed over the resident's wrist, and the room went still. Ward 7, Bed 12. A post-op patient who had already received his dose 4 hours earlier. Simone knew that because she had signed the chart herself. She had signed it in blue ink at 06:14, and now it was 10:20, and a second-year resident was about to push the same fentanyl load into the same man's vein. "Stop," she said. One word, flat. The resident froze. "The order says..." "The order is a duplicate." Simone lifted the syringe out of his fingers and read the label against the light. Someone entered it twice. Different timestamp, same patient, same drug. She set it down on the tray, capped, out of reach. He'd have coded in 20 minutes. The resident's face lost its color. Around them, the monitors kept their steady rhythm, and the man in the bed slept on, unaware that a stranger's grip had just kept his heart beating. Simone pulled the tablet from the foot of the bed and scrolled. The double entry sat there in the system like a small, clean lie. She screenshotted it. She timestamped the screenshot. Then she wrote her name in the incident log, spelled it out, and hit save before anyone could tell her not to. That was the part they hated. Not that she caught the errors, that she wrote them down. She had been chief surgical safety nurse at Miran for 2 years, long enough to know that in this hospital a mistake was never just a mistake. It was a thing that belonged to someone, and that someone would rather it disappear than be fixed. She had learned to move fast, to log faster, to make the record exist before the record could be argued with. The resident was still standing there. Young, sweating. "Go wash your face," Simone said, gentler now. "Then come back and I'll show you how the flag works, so next time the machine stops you instead of me." He nodded and fled. Simone stayed. She checked the line, checked the pump, checked the man's pupils. Only when the numbers were where she wanted them did she straighten her white coat and walk out into the corridor. The corridor smelled of disinfectant and cheap coffee. Nurses moved past her in pale green scrubs. She was the only one in royal blue, the only one in the structured white coat, the only black woman on a floor of 40 people, and after 2 years she had stopped counting how many times a family member had walked past her to ask a Korean orderly where the American doctor was. She didn't correct them anymore. She just did the work. Her phone buzzed. A text from pharmacy. "Who authorized the second fentanyl order on bed 12? She typed back one line. "Nobody living. It's a system duplicate, freezing the account that entered it." She sent it, and then she froze the account, because she could, because safety protocol gave her that key, and she used it the way other people use their fists. She was 3 steps from the nurse's station when Dr. Han Sung-won came around the corner and stopped in front of her. He was tall, lean, upright as a closed door. White coat, gray suit underneath, cufflinks catching the fluorescent light. Chief surgeon. He looked at her the way a man looks at a stain on a shirt he is about to throw away. "You disabled a physician's ordering account," Han said. "I flagged a fatal duplicate," Simone said. "The account entered a second lethal dose 4 hours after the first. Protocol says I freeze it until we find the source. The source is a nurse who doesn't understand the system. The source is the system. She kept her voice level. I have the screenshots. 2 orders, 1 patient, timestamps, 4 hours apart, same prescriber ID. She paused. Your ID, Dr. Han. For a half second, nothing on his face moved. Then he smiled. It was a thin, practiced thing. Come with me, he said. He didn't wait. He turned and walked, and she followed him, because refusing in the open corridor would cost her more than following would. He led her into an empty consult room and shut the door. The glass was frosted to waist height. Above it, anyone in the hall could see 2 shapes but no faces. Han did not sit. Neither did she. You've been here 2 years, he said. You came with excellent references. The Americans love a paper trail. He unbuttoned his coat, slow. Let me explain how a hospital works. A hospital is a reputation. The reputation is worth more than any single patient, any single dose, any single nurse. A patient nearly died an hour ago. A patient nearly received a second dose that a competent staff would have caught quietly, corrected quietly, and forgotten quietly. He stepped closer. Instead, you screenshot, you freeze accounts, you write my name into a log. Because it was your name, my ID. Han said, which 40 people can use, which residents borrow when they're too lazy to log in. You know that. You wrote it down anyway. She held his eyes. I write down what the record shows. If the record is wrong, the record gets corrected in the open, with a note, with a signature. That's the job. Han was quiet a moment. Then he reached out and, with one finger, adjusted the lapel of her coat, straightening a fold that was already straight. She stepped back before he finished the motion. There's a merger coming, he said, as if she hadn't moved. Miran is being valued right now, this quarter, by people who count incidents. Every flag you file lowers the number. Do you understand what a number is, to the people above me? He let that sit. You are a very expensive kind of honest. I can make you cheap, or I can make you gone. Is that a threat? It's a valuation. He buttoned his coat again. Delete the log entry. Refile it as a training note. No prescriber ID. I'll handle the resident. No. The word landed in the small room like a dropped tray. Han's jaw tightened, once, and released. You think that coat protects you, he said. It's a costume. I decide who wears it on this floor. He opened the door. 2 years, and you still think the rules are the thing that's real. The rules are what we hand to people we've already decided to protect. You are not one of those people. He walked out. Simone stood in the consult room with her hand flat against the cold edge of the exam table. Her pulse was up. She counted it down, the way she'd trained herself to. 4 in, 7 hold, 8 out, until the number in her wrist matched the number she wanted. Then she took out her phone and emailed the incident log to herself, to her private account, to a second private account, and to a folder no one at Miran could reach. The record would exist. She would make sure of that much. Down the hall, a nurse named Bora waited for her by the supply cart, arms folded, eyes on the floor. You froze his ordering account, Bora said, low. The whole floor knows already. The whole floor should thank me. The whole floor is scared. Bora glanced toward the consult room, then back. Simone, my contract renews in 2 months. I have a kid. When Han decides someone was in the room and someone wasn't, I need to be someone who wasn't. She unfolded her arms and reached for a box of gloves she didn't need, just to have somewhere to put her hands. You caught it. I'm glad you caught it. But don't put my name near the log. Please. Simone looked at her for a moment. She was not angry. That was the thing people always got wrong about her. She was never angry at the ones who ducked. She just filed them away, quietly, in the same place she filed every wall she'd hit since she was a girl. Your name's not in it, Simone said. It's only ever my name in it. It's always only ever my name. Bora's shoulders dropped an inch, relief and shame at once, and she left without another word. Simone stood alone by the cart. She thought about the first hospital, the one in Chicago, the one she never put on the good version of her resume. 24 years old, night shift, a wrong dose she had questioned out loud and been told to let go. She had let it go. The patient had not gone home. Nobody wrote that one down. There was no record of the girl who died because a room full of tired adults decided a number mattered more than a name, and there was no record of the nurse who had known and stayed quiet. That was the wound, not Han, not the coat, not the 2 years of being walked past. The wound was the silence she had once agreed to, and the promise she had made afterward, alone in a stairwell, that she would never again be the person who knew and said nothing. So she wrote things down. She wrote everything down. It cost her, at every job, in every country, and it had cost her again just now. She knew what the cost was. She paid it anyway, because the alternative was a stairwell and a promise broken, and she would rather be gone than be that. She pulled her phone out one more time and checked that all 4 copies of the log had sent. 4 green checks. Good. She put the phone away. Then the overhead paged emergency, a code for the ground floor, a young female patient, collapse, incoming, and Simone did what she always did when the building called. She started walking toward the sound. Across the city, in a glass tower that had no name on the door, Kang Min-jae read the same words Simone had used, and it made him just as tired. Merger. The prospectus lay open on the table in front of him, 40 pages, bound in charcoal, the Haryong crest embossed on the cover in a gray so dark it was almost black. His uncle had had it printed on heavy stock, the way a man prints a thing he intends to force through. "You've read it," Kang Dae-sung said. It wasn't a question. Twice. Min-jae turned a page without looking down. He was watching his uncle instead. Broad man, gray at the temples, the thin old scar near the right eyebrow that Min-jae had known since he was a boy. "You want to legalize us. I want to make us permanent." Dae-sung leaned forward. 30 years your father built this. Ports, construction, the clinics, cash that has to be washed through 6 hands before it's clean. One bad season and it all sits frozen. But this, he tapped the prospectus, twice. This puts our money inside a hospital group. Real shares, board seats, doctors who owe us, clean quarterly numbers that no prosecutor can touch. Miran, Min-jae said. Miran, and 2 others after it. In 5 years the Haryong name is on a stock exchange and no one remembers what we were. Min-jae closed the prospectus. He was 32, and he had been running the clan for 19 months, since the night his father died, and in 19 months, he had learned that his uncle never wanted a thing for the reason he stated. Dae-sung wanted permanence. Fine, but permanence for the family, or permanence for the man who controlled the votes that came with the shares? "Where does the seed money come from?" Min-jae asked. Dae-sung smiled, unbothered. "Accounts, reserves, nothing you need to sign for." "Everything I need to sign for." Min-jae stood. He was taller than his uncle by a hand, and he used it, not often, but now. "If Haryong money buys shares of a hospital, my name is on the buyer. If the money is dirty, my name is on the crime. If a patient is harmed so a number looks better on a page, my name is on the body." He rolled his shoulders, and at the left side of his collar, the top of the dragon showed dark against his skin. The sea serpent inked from below his ear, and it moved when the tendons in his neck moved. "So yes, uncle, I need to sign for all of it, because it is all mine." For a moment the 2 men stood on either side of the table, and the room held its breath. Then Dae-sung sat back and spread his hands, the reasonable elder again. "You sound like your father in his last year," he said. "Cautious, sentimental. It's what got him. Careful." The word was very quiet. Dae-sung stopped. Min-jae did not raise his voice. He almost never did. The men who worked for him had learned to fear the quiet from him more than the shout from anyone else. "Say what you were going to say about my father," he said, "and be sure you want to have said it." The silence stretched. In the corner of the room, near the door, Choi Jun-ho shifted his weight, one hand loose at his side, the small earpiece catching light. He said nothing. He didn't need to. His presence was the sentence. Dae-sung chose the other road. "I misspoke," he said. He gathered his overcoat from the chair. "Read the prospectus a 3rd time. The Board of Miran meets this week to review a safety incident report. If the incident numbers are low, the valuation holds. If they're high," he shrugged into the wool, "the deal dies and we stay what we are. Frozen. Illegal. One raid from nothing." He paused at the door. You want to protect the family. So do I. We just count the cost differently. He left. Min-jae stood a long moment over the closed prospectus. Then he looked at Choi. The safety incident report, Min-jae said. Miran, who writes it? Choi already had his phone out. He'd learned, in 19 months, to have the answer before the question landed. Chief Surgical Safety Nurse, he said, scrolling. American, Carter, Simone Carter. He turned the screen. A hospital ID photo. Royal blue scrubs, white coat, a face that looked straight into the lens without softening for it. 2 years. Files more incident flags than the rest of the staff combined. Min-jae looked at the photo for a moment longer than he needed to. So, the deal my uncle wants, he said slowly. Lives or dies on the honesty of one nurse who doesn't know we exist. Looks that way. Min-jae almost smiled. He didn't. Find out who's leaning on her, he said. Someone will be. When a number is worth this much, someone always is. He picked up the prospectus and dropped it, unread a third time, into the drawer. And keep her name out of every mouth in this building. If my uncle learns she matters, she stops being safe. Choi nodded and went. Min-jae stayed by the window a while. 19 months ago, he had knelt on a warehouse floor with his father's blood on his hands and his uncle's voice in his ear, telling him what a leader did now, what a leader signed now, what a leader forgave now. Everyone in the clan believed one version of that night. His uncle had made sure of the version. In it, a rival had killed the old boss, and Min-jae had avenged him, and the family had closed ranks. It was a clean story. It fit on one page, like the prospectus. Min-jae had never believed it. He had knelt on that floor and looked at the wound, and known, the way a man knows a wrong note in a piece he grew up hearing, that the story did not fit the body, but he had no proof. So he had said nothing, and taken the chair, and spent 19 months building quietly toward the day he would. A shell company his uncle didn't know about. A private line of inquiry no one at the table had seen. He carried it the way Simone carried her 4 green checks, and for the same reason, though neither of them knew yet that they carried the same weight. He touched his collar and felt the ink there under his fingers, warm, and made himself breathe until it lay down again. A decision that had felt like a weight for 19 months felt, for the first time, like a door. At the conservatory, Kang Eun-ji was 4 bars from the end of the piece when the floor tilted. She had played the passage 100 times. Chopin, the slow one, the one their mother used to hum in the kitchen. Her fingers knew it without her. That was the strange part. Later, when she tried to remember, her hands kept playing for almost a full second after her eyes stopped working, after the light in the practice room broke apart into white pieces, and the keys went soft under her fingertips like they were made of water. Then the bench wasn't under her. She heard the piano make a sound no piano should make, a flat crash of her elbow across the low keys, and then the wood floor came up and met her cheek, and the small pendant she always wore, her mother's pendant, swung out on its chain and tapped once against the boards beside her open eye. Voices. Running, somebody's hands. Yoon-ji? Yoon-ji, can you hear me? She could. She just couldn't answer. Her mouth had the shape of the word, but no air behind it. A face swam over her, her accompanist, mouth moving, and behind him, the ceiling lights smeared into long streaks. Her right hand wouldn't close. She watched it not close, curled on the floor near her face, and that frightened her more than the falling had, because those were her hands. Those were the only things she had ever been sure of, and now one of them lay there like it belonged to someone else. "Call an ambulance," someone shouted. "Call her brother." No, don't call, just the ambulance," she wanted to say. "Don't tell Min-jae, he'll bring the whole world down." She wanted to say, "It's nothing, I skipped lunch." What came out was a sound with no shape. The last thing she saw clearly, before the streaks closed over, was the pendant, swinging, catching the light, her mother's small gold weight, ticking against the floor like a clock she couldn't stop. The ambulance ride came back to her in pieces, a stranger's blue glove pressing 2 fingers to her throat, a number called out and repeated, the ceiling of the vehicle, ribbed and white, sliding, and then a set of doors, and a rush of colder air, and a voice that said the name of the hospital out loud, Miran, the way you'd read a sign, and she thought, through the fog that her brother owned a piece of a place with that name, or wanted to, or had argued about it at the dinner table, and she couldn't remember which, and it didn't matter, because her hand still wouldn't close. A man in a gray suit under a white coat leaned over her stretcher before it had fully stopped moving. Thin glasses, small eyes that went over her face and her chart at the same speed, the way a buyer looks at a thing and its price tag at once. Kang, he said, reading the name off the intake sheet. Kang Eun-ji. Something shifted behind the small eyes, some quiet arithmetic. I'll take this one myself. A nurse said something about neuro protocol, about waiting for imaging, about her being conscious. I said I'll take it. The man in the white coat repeated, pleasant, final, and he laid one hand on the rail of her stretcher, the way a man lays a hand on a thing he has decided is his. Prep her. I want her upstairs. Yoon-ji tried, with everything she had, to close her right hand around the rail before he could move her. It stayed open. The call reached Min-jae in the car. He was 3 blocks from the tower when Choi's name lit the phone, and Choi never called when a text would do, so Min-jae answered on the first ring and said only, "What?" "Yoon-ji," Choi said. She collapsed. Rehearsal. She's conscious now, but they're moving her. A breath. Boss. They took her to Miran. Min-jae's hand tightened on the door handle until the leather creaked. "Which floor?" he said. "Emergency? They're talking about admitting her. Neuro workup." Choi hesitated. "There's a surgeon already asking to take the case. Han Seung-won, chief of surgery." Something in the way Choi said it made Min-jae look up. "You know that name," Min-jae said. "I looked into everyone at Miran this morning, like you told me." Choi's voice was careful. "Han's the one leaning on the nurse. Carter. The two of them had a closed-room meeting an hour ago. Han wants a safety flag deleted." She refused. The city slid past the window, wet and bright. Min-jae watched none of it. He was doing the thing his father had taught him, and his uncle had never learned, which was to hold 3 facts in his hand at once and feel for the wire that connected them. The merger that lived or died on one nurse's honesty. The surgeon who wanted that nurse silenced. And now his sister, his only sister, the one soft thing left in his life, lying in that same building while that same surgeon asked to hold a knife over her. "Turn the car," Min-jae said to the driver. "Boss, the meeting. Turn the car." The car turned. "Choi," Min-jae's voice had dropped into the register the men feared. "Get to Miran before I do. Do not let Han Seung-won touch my sister. Not a needle, not a chart, not a word. If he's already in the room, you stand between them and you keep standing there until I walk in. Understand me?" On my way, and Choi. Min-jae watched the hospital's white tower rise ahead of them through the windshield, growing, closing. The nurse, Carter. Where is she right now? A pause while Choi checked. "Emergency floor," Choi said. "Same floor as your sister." Min-jae ended the call. He sat very still while the car ate the last blocks, and at his collar, without his knowing it, the dark head of the dragon had risen above the fabric, the way it always did when his blood came up. 2 hours ago, he had told Choi to keep the nurse safe because a number was worth it. Now the number had a face, and the face was in the same building as everything he had left to lose. He thought of Yoon-ji at 6, learning the scales, her small hands too short for the octave, stretching anyway. He thought of the pendant she never took off, the one thing of their mother's that Dae-sung had not managed to fold into the estate. He thought of the promise he had made at their mother's funeral, the only promise he had never once been tempted to break, that whatever the family became, whatever he had to become to lead it, Yoon-ji would stay outside it. Clean, untouched. A girl with a piano and no blood on her name. And now she was on a stretcher inside a building his uncle wanted to buy, under the hands of a man his own head of security had flagged an hour ago as a threat. Nothing about that was a coincidence. Min-jae had stopped believing in coincidence on a warehouse floor 19 months ago. The car stopped under the emergency canopy. Min-jae was out before it fully braked, and the glass doors of Miran Hospital slid open in front of him like they had been waiting all their lives to let this particular man walk in. "Let him go." The words came out of Simone before she decided to say them. She was still standing between the gurney and the wall, one hand flat on the rail beside Yoon-ji's sedated head, and the other pointing at the two men crushed together 6 feet away. Min Jae had Han pinned by the collar. The chief surgeon's heels were off the floor. The dark line under Min Jae's left ear had climbed above the collar of his shirt, feeding down into the fabric, and every nurse frozen in the corridor was looking at it. I said let him go. Min Jae turned his head. He looked at her the way people look at a fire alarm that has started ringing for no reason. He hit you. And if you break his jaw, he stops being useful to me. She kept her voice level. Her cheek was still hot where the slap had landed, and she refused to touch it. Put him down. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then Min Jae opened his hand. Han dropped an inch, caught his own weight, and staggered back into the crash cart. Something metal rolled off it and hit the tiles. He straightened his coat with 2 sharp tugs, and his small eyes went from Min Jae's neck to Simone's face and back, doing arithmetic. You have no idea what you just touched, Han said to Min Jae. Neither do you, Simone said. She stepped away from the wall for the first time and put both hands on the gurney rail. Yoonji's breathing was slow, and even under the sedation, her right hand curled against her stomach, the fingers still refusing to open. The pendant on the girl's chest rose and fell. Simone had already read the chart twice. She read it a 3rd time now, out loud, because she wanted witnesses. Kang Eun-ji, 24. Collapse, right hand weakness. Booked for emergency decompression upstairs in. She checked the wall clock. 11 minutes. She looked up. Cancelled, as of now. Han's mouth opened. The consent for that surgery, Simone went on, is signed off a scan that was taken 40 minutes before this patient arrived at this hospital. The radiologist's signature on it belongs to a man who was off shift. And the labs that would have flagged the discrepancy are gone from the system. I have the deletion timestamp. She let that sit. So no, nobody takes her upstairs. The corridor had gone very quiet. Min Jae had not moved from where he'd released Han. He was watching Simone now, not his sister, and his jaw had set. Say that again, he said. Which part? The scan is old. Older than the patient's arrival, which means somebody knew what her scan was going to show before they had her. Simone reached under the gurney, pulled a sealed specimen bag off the lower shelf, and held it up. 2 vials. And I want these tested somewhere that isn't this building. Han found his voice. Those are hospital property. They're evidence. She didn't look at him. Choi, the tall man in the dark suit at the end of the corridor, didn't react to his own name for half a second, surprised she knew it. Then he stepped forward. Take these to an independent lab, Simone said. Chain of custody. Photograph them being sealed. If they leave your hand once, they're worthless. She held the bag out over the gurney, into the no-man's land between herself and Min Jae's men, and she waited. Min Jae gave a single nod. Choi took the bag. Han watched the vials leave the floor, and for the first time something crossed his face that wasn't arrogance. He recovered fast. This is a kidnapping of a clinical decision, he said, loud enough for the corridor. I am the chief of surgery. I will have security remove all of you, and this patient goes up on schedule. Try, Min Jae said. That was all. 1 word. Han looked at the neck again and said nothing. They moved Eun-ji into an empty recovery bay because Simone refused to leave her in an open corridor, and she refused to let Min Jae's people be the ones pushing the gurney. She pushed it herself, with a junior nurse named Bora on the other rail, and Min Jae walked at the foot of the bed with his hands in his pockets like a man escorting a coffin. You're the safety nurse, he said, once the doors closed behind them. Carter. She didn't ask how he knew her name, and you're the reason there are 3 men in the hallway who don't work here. 2 of them work for me. 1 of them I've never seen before. He looked at Yoonji's face. Some of the granite came off him when he did. She's my sister. I gathered. Somebody made her collapse. Somebody made her look like she needed her skull opened, Simone said. That's a different sentence. I don't know yet if they made her collapse. I know they built the paperwork before she got here. Min Jae's eyes came back up to her. You said 40 minutes before. The scan is time-stamped 1:10. Her ambulance logged in at 1:52. You can't image a brain that isn't in the building. She locked the gurney brake with her foot. Either the clock on the machine is wrong, or the scan isn't hers. Which do you think? I think somebody had a scan ready, and a signature ready, and a surgery booked, and all they needed was a body with the right name to put on top of it. She finally let herself say the thing she'd been holding since the corridor. Your sister was the body. She watched it land. His hand came out of his pocket, went flat against the gurney rail, an inch from his sister's foot, and stopped there. Who? He said. That's not my job. My job is that she doesn't go under a knife she doesn't need. Simone pulled the chart back off the rail. And I need a neurologist in this room who has never met your sister, never met Han, and doesn't know what's writing on the answer. If I call one, he belongs to this hospital, and this hospital is the problem. Can you get one who doesn't? Min Jae took out his phone. How fast? An hour ago. He was already dialing. The neurologist arrived in 35 minutes and hated all of them equally, which was exactly what Simone wanted. He was a small, sour man in his 60s named Dr. Yoon, retired from a university hospital, brought in a car by one of Min Jae's people, and clearly told nothing except that he'd be paid well to give a straight answer. He looked at Min Jae's suit, looked at the tattoo, looked at Simone in her scrubs, and asked the room to leave. She stays, he said, pointing at Simone. The rest of you, out. I don't examine patients with an audience of men. Min Jae hesitated at the door. She's safer in this room than she has been all day, Simone told him. Go. He went. Yoon worked for 20 minutes. He tested reflexes, ran a penlight, pressed and prodded, lifted the stubborn right hand and watched the fingers, took blood himself into his own tubes because he trusted no one's labels. He asked Simone 3 questions and grunted at all 3 answers. Then he sat down on the rolling stool and looked at the sedated girl for a long moment. There is nothing structurally wrong with this brain, he said. I would bet my license, which I no longer need, that a scan of her right now is clean. He nodded at the curled hand. That is not a stroke, and it is not a mass. The weakness is real, but it is. He searched for the word in English, gave up, used the clinical one. Pharmacological. Something is in her that mimics the picture. It will wear off. It was meant to be photographed, not treated. Simone had known it since the corridor. Hearing it out loud still put a cold weight in her chest. Meant to be photographed. Somebody wanted a reason to operate, Yoon said. He stood, snapped his bag shut. I will write this. I will sign it. And then I will forget I was ever in this building, because whatever this is, I want no part of it. He looked at her over his glasses. You should want no part of it either, and you clearly do, so you are a fool, a useful one. Get her fluids and let it clear. He left the signed statement on the tray table and walked out. Simone stood alone with the girl for a moment. Yoonji's fingers, so long locked, had loosened a fraction in the last hour. The drug was already going. In a day she'd close her hand around a spoon and never know how close a saw had come to her head. Simone folded the neurologist's statement, photographed it, and mailed the photograph to the same 4 private accounts that already held the fentanyl log. Then she opened the door. Min Jae was standing exactly where she'd left him, which surprised her. Choi was back, phone in hand. The unknown third man was gone. Clean brain, Simone said. Whatever's in her wears off on its own. She never needed surgery. Somebody drugged her to make it look like she did, and somebody built the paperwork to cut into her while she was under. Min Jae absorbed it without a sound. It was Choi who spoke. The vials are at the lab. Sealed, photographed, chain-logged. He glanced at Min Jae. And I pulled the OR booking. It was entered under Dr. Han's authorization at 1:40, 12 minutes before she was in the building. So he knew. Min Jae's voice had dropped into something flat and quiet, which Simone was starting to understand was the dangerous register. He knew she was coming, and he knew what he was going to do to her, before she got here. He may not be the top of it, Simone said. He's a surgeon, not a strategist. Somebody wanted your sister in an OR badly enough to fake a brain injury. That costs money, and it costs planning. Ask yourself who benefits from your sister being cut open, or from you being in this building the day it happens. Min Jae looked at her for a long moment. Something moved behind his eyes, something she couldn't read, and later she'd realize it was the first time he thought of his uncle's name in connection with his sister's body. He didn't say the name. What he said was, "What do you want?" "Excuse me?" "You canceled a surgery for a stranger. You sent evidence to a lab with my man because you needed hands and I had them. You're not doing this for free, and you're not doing it for me." He stepped closer. You want something. Say it. Simone thought about lying. She was good at it when it protected a patient. But she looked at this man in his expensive suit, with a sea dragon crawling up his neck and a sister sleeping off a poison 10 feet away, and she decided the truth was the stronger position. I want 3 things, she said. And they're not negotiable. If you can't give me all 3, walk your people out of my hospital and I'll handle Han alone. I'm listening. She held up one finger. 1. Nobody in your world touches Han, or the radiologist or anyone connected to this, until I say so. Not a broken finger, not a threat, nothing. The second one of these people ends up in a river, it's a gang killing, and everything they did becomes a cover story. I need them alive, employed, and stupid enough to keep making mistakes. Min-jae's jaw worked, but he nodded. 2. Whatever your man Choi finds, she looked at Choi. I see all of it. Raw, not the version you decide I'm ready for. If you filter what I see, I miss the thing that gets us both killed. Full records or nothing. That's a lot of trust to ask a man you met an hour ago. You're asking me to protect your sister with my career. I'd say we're even. She held up the 3rd finger. 3. When this is done, and it will end, one way or another, my name stays out of your world completely. No debt, no favor owed. No, the clan remembers its friends. I did this because they nearly killed a patient in my care, and because I don't stay quiet anymore. Not for you. When it's over, you don't know me. The corridor was silent, except for the soft mechanical breathing of a monitor somewhere. Min-jae looked at her hand, 3 fingers still up, and then at her face. You're the first person in 19 months who's asked me for less power instead of more. I don't want your power. I want my patient to wake up and my license to survive. Those are the terms. He put out his hand. She looked at it. A signet ring, a watch that cost more than she made in a year, and under the cuff, she knew, more of the dragon. She thought about Chicago. She thought about a man dying because she'd been afraid of a chart. She thought about 4 backup copies of a log sitting in 4 inboxes because she would never again be the person who knew and said nothing. She shook his hand. Deal, Min-jae said. Deal, she said. Now get your men out of the recovery ward before someone photographs them and I lose condition 1 on day 1. He got his men out. That, at least, he did fast. By late afternoon, Yoonji's fingers had opened enough to grip Bora's hand when the young nurse checked her line, and the girl surfaced from sedation confused, thirsty, and asking for her brother. Simone kept her in the recovery bay under her own name and her own eye, and wrote a chart so clean and so detailed that any lawyer reading it would find no gap. She noted the cancelled OR. She noted the independent consult. She noted the specimen sent out. Every line was a wall. She did not go home. She'd stopped pretending to herself that she was going home the moment she'd shaken his hand. Instead, she went down to medical records, because the deleted labs bothered her more than anything. A drug in the girl was a crime you could point to, but deleted labs meant someone had access to the system deep enough to remove things, and that someone was still in the building, still working, probably watching her walk down this corridor right now. The records clerk was a nervous woman who did not want to help her, and helped her anyway, once Simone said the words, patient safety incident, and documented. Simone pulled the access logs for Yoonji's file. Someone had opened it, deleted 3 lab entries, and closed it, all in a 90-second window at 1:38. The user ID was Hans, which was too clean. Simone stared at it. A man who ran a scheme this careful didn't delete labs under his own login 2 minutes before booking a fraudulent surgery under his own login. That wasn't a criminal. That was a fall guy, or a man arrogant enough to think he'd never be checked, and she couldn't yet tell which. She photographed the access log, she mailed it to the 4 accounts, and she went to find Park Hae-jin. The CFO of Miran Hospital worked late, which Simone had counted on. The champagne-colored suit was hung on the back of the office door, and Hae-jin was in shirt sleeves at her desk under a single lamp. Glasses pushed up into her low bun. A leather briefcase open beside her full of paper she was moving from one folder to another with the speed of someone hiding it. She looked up when Simone knocked, and her hands went still over the paper. "You're the incident nurse," Hae-jin said. "Simone Carter." "I know who you are." Hae-jin's eyes went to the door behind Simone, checking the corridor. You should not be in this office. A patient was drugged and nearly operated on today for no medical reason, Simone said. The paperwork was built before she arrived. Someone in this building has system access deep enough to delete lab records. You're the CFO. You'd know whose access reaches that far. Hyjin's hand closed over the folder. I move numbers. I don't touch clinical records. But you know the merger's valued on incident numbers. Simone watched her. You know low incident reports keep the deal alive. And you're sitting here at 8 at night moving paper into a briefcase like the building's on fire. For a second, Hyjin's composure cracked, just at the corner of her mouth, and Simone saw it. Not guilt, fear. The particular fear of someone who knows exactly how bad it is and has already decided she can't afford to say. You need to leave, Hyjin said quietly. For your own sake, you have no idea whose money is in this deal. Then tell me. No. Hyjin stood, gathered the folders, snapped the briefcase shut. Her hands were not steady. I have a daughter, Miss Carter. I have already said more than I should by telling you to leave. Please, she lifted the briefcase. Whatever you think you found today, drop it. They will not come for you with a knife. They will make you disappear on paper, and paper is the one weapon I know they own. She paused at the door, and something almost human crossed her face. You caught it. Good. Now stop. That's the only advice I have that keeps you employed. She left Simone standing alone in the office under the single lamp. Simone did not drop it, but she filed the shape of that fear away, because a frightened CFO who moved paper at night was not a person who knew nothing. She was a person waiting to be given a reason braver than her fear. Simone would find it later. Right now she had a patient to watch. She was in the recovery bay at 9:40, checking Yoonji's returning grip, when her badge stopped working. She noticed it the ordinary way. She swiped out to get coffee, and the reader flashed red. She swiped again. Red. She tried the door to the medication room. Red. She stood in the corridor holding a dead plastic card and felt the floor tilt very slightly under her. Her phone buzzed. Hospital email. Effective immediately, your access to Miran hospital systems and facilities has been suspended pending investigation of a serious professional misconduct complaint. You are directed to leave the premises. Do not access any patient records. HR will contact you. The complaint number was attached. She opened it with 2 fingers gone cold. There was video. The file loaded and Simone watched herself, in the empty consult room, that morning, leaning over a workstation. In the footage, her hand moved over the keyboard. The timestamp on the corner read 10:14, and the caption, filed by the department, said she had been recorded. Altering incident documentation and deleting patient laboratory records to fabricate a safety complaint against a senior physician. She had been in that room that morning. She had leaned over that workstation. She had been reading her own log to make sure it's saved. But the footage had been cut. She could see it if she looked. A stutter at 10:14. A splice where 2 clips met. Her own body in the same clothes but a half-second wrong. Someone had taken real video of her doing a real, innocent thing and married it to a caption that made it a crime. The deleted labs at 1:38 under Han's login. Now footage at 10:14 that made it look like she'd been the one deleting. They weren't hiding the deletion anymore. They were giving it to her. Simone stood in the corridor with a dead badge and a phone full of a lie about her own hands, and for one long second, the old Chicago cold went up her spine. The terror of being the one blamed, the one they hang it on, the small nurse against the men who own the record. Then Yoonji's monitor beeped softly through the bay door behind her, and the cold turned into something harder. She photographed the email. She photographed the video file. She mailed both to the 4 accounts before HR could pull them. Her phone rang in her hand. Unknown number. They deactivated your badge, Minjai said. No greeting. How do you know that? Because Choi watches the building, and your card just went dead on the system, and there's a misconduct flag on your file that was opened 11 minutes ago and routed to the Merger Review Council. Not HR, the council. A pause. Somebody wanted the people voting on the deal to see you branded a liar before they read your safety report. Simone leaned against the wall. The report. You were writing the report that could kill their deal. Now you're a nurse under investigation for faking safety complaints. Every number you ever flagged is suspect. His voice was quiet and even. "They didn't fire you today because you saw the scan. They fired you because of what you were going to write on Thursday." She closed her eyes. Condition 3 flashed through her mind. "When it's over, you don't know me." And she understood, standing in that corridor, that it was already too late for her name to stay out of anything. "I need the raw records," she said. "Condition 2. All of it. Whatever Choi's got. He's outside in the black car. He's been building something for 2 hours, and it changes things." A breath on the line. "It's not just your sister, Carter. It's not just Yoonji. He found a pattern. You need to see it before you leave the building, because after tonight they won't let you back in." Simone looked through the glass of the recovery bay at the sleeping girl whose hand was learning to open again. "I'm coming down," she said. Choi had a laptop open on his knees in the back of the car and the dome light on, and he turned the screen toward her before she'd even closed the door. "I pulled 3 years of emergency surgery bookings at Miran," he said. "Cross-referenced them against 2 things, the merger's internal timeline and the clan's asset transfers." He tapped the screen. "Look at the dates." Simone looked. It was a calendar of emergencies, sudden surgeries, booked fast, high value, the kind that inflate a hospital's crisis numbers or bury them, depending on who's counting. And beside each one, Choi had lined up a second date, a board vote, a share transfer, a revaluation. They matched, not roughly, exactly. Every time the merger needed a number to move, up or down, a surgery appeared in the days before it. Emergencies on schedule, bodies on a calendar. "They've been doing this for years," Simone said slowly. "Faking surgeries. Timing them to votes. Timing them to money." Choi scrolled. "Each one lines up with a transfer. Someone is moving funds every time one of these operations happens. Using the surgeries as cover or as triggers, I can't tell yet, but your patient today," he stopped. "My patient today was the next one on the calendar," Simone said. 2 days before Thursday's vote. Choi looked up at her. Kang Eun-ji wasn't a random collapse, she was scheduled. In the front seat, Min Jae had gone completely still. He was looking at the calendar of surgeries and asset transfers, at his sister's name sitting at the bottom of a list of manufactured emergencies stretching back 3 years. And Simone watched a man realize that the machine he'd been fighting his uncle over in a boardroom had just tried to put a saw in his sister's skull. "Choi," Min Jae said, very quietly. "Who authorized the transfers? Every one of these. Whose account?" Choi hesitated. It was the first time Simone had seen the security chief hesitate. "That's the part I need to show you inside," Choi said. "Not in a car." But Simone was already looking at the screen, at the column of dates, at the pattern nobody was supposed to see, and she understood 2 things at once, that she was holding the thing that could clear her name and kill the deal and save the girl upstairs. And that whoever built this had just made her a suspect 2 days before she could prove any of it. The badge in her pocket was a dead piece of plastic. The report she was meant to file was already poison. And somewhere in this hospital, a man was congratulating himself on how cleanly he'd buried a nurse. Simone closed the laptop lid over Choi's hands. "Print all of it," she said. "Tonight, 3 copies. Because tomorrow morning I walk back into that building as a suspended employee, and I am going to make them explain a calendar." Choi made the 3 copies on a machine in a print shop that stayed open past midnight, and Simone watched each page slide out warm under the fluorescent light. She squared the stacks on the counter. 1 went into her bag. 1 went into the glove box of the black car. The 3rd she folded once and handed back to Choi without a word. He understood. Copies that lived in 3 different hands survived what copies in 1 hand did not. Then the phone in her pocket buzzed, and it was a number she didn't know. She let it ring twice before she answered. A recorded voice, flat and Korean, then English. Her hospital email account had been placed under administrative hold pending the misconduct review. Any outgoing mail from that address was now blocked. Any incoming mail would be quarantined. She stood very still on the sidewalk. "They're closing the doors," she said, not to Choi, to herself. Choi looked up from the folded page. "Which doors?" "The ones I already walked through." She had mailed everything to 4 private accounts hours ago. Those were safe. But the hospital's own record of her mailing them, the sent folder, The timestamps that proved she'd raised the alarm before they suspended her, that was inside the account they'd just frozen. If they wiped it, the story would read backward. Suspended nurse, then wild accusations. Not the other way around. She got the car door open and slid the laptop back out. "I need to log in one more time," she said, "before they seal it." Choi was already shaking his head. "If you log in now, the hold flags it. They'll know you're still working." "They already know," she typed. The screen loaded the hospital webmail, the same tired gray she'd stared at for 2 years. Her password worked. For a second, she thought she'd beaten them. Then the inbox refreshed, and it was empty. Not quarantined. Empty. Sent folder. Empty. Trash. Empty. 2 years of a working nurse's correspondence gone in the time it took a machine to decide she was a liar. She sat back against the seat. "They didn't lock it," she said. "They erased it." Min-jae turned in the front seat. He'd been quiet the whole drive, the calendar still open on his knee, but now he looked at her the way he'd looked at Han in the corridor. "You have copies." "I have copies of the documents." Her voice stayed level, and that flatness cost her something. "I don't have the record that says I sent them from inside, on time, before you people ever touched this." That mattered. That was the difference between a whistleblower and a woman with a grudge. He didn't answer. He didn't have an answer that helped. The vials, she thought. The vials were still out. The independent lab still had them, sealed, photographed, logged. Whatever they'd done to her email, they couldn't reach into a private lab and pour 2 vials down a sink. She held on to that. Then Choi's phone rang, and she watched his face change. He listened. He said 3 words in Korean. He hung up and did not look at her right away, and that was how she knew before he said it. "The lab," Choi said. "There was a break-in. Tonight, sample refrigeration unit." Simone closed her eyes for one breath. "How many samples?" she said. "All of them, the whole unit, not just ours." He said it fast, the way people say a thing they want to be less true. "It reads like a theft ring. Refrigerated units get hit for research compounds. Police are calling it opportunistic." "It's not opportunistic." She opened her eyes. "It's Tuesday and my sister's blood is gone 2 hours after a neurologist signed a statement about it." Choi held the phone against his chest and gave her the rest of it in pieces, the way a man gives bad news when he's still hoping half of it turns out wrong. The alarm had tripped at 11:52. Security footage from the lab's own cameras showed a maintenance van, plates registered to a cleaning contractor that had gone out of business 14 months ago. 2 men, gloves, faces down, 6 minutes inside. They took the whole refrigeration unit's contents and nothing else. No computers. No drugs from the locked cabinet, nothing a real theft ring would have grabbed on the way out. 6 minutes, Simone repeated. They knew which unit. They knew the alarm response time. They were gone before the private guard finished his coffee. She pressed 2 fingers to the bridge of her nose. "That's not a break-in. That's a retrieval." "The police report will say theft," Choi said. "The police report will say whatever gets it closed fastest." She dropped her hand. "That's not their fault. It's just how a stolen fridge looks from the outside." Nobody corrected the word sister. She heard it leave her own mouth and let it stand. Min-jae's hand closed on the edge of the calendar, and the paper creased. "Yoon's statement," Simone said. "The doctor's statement is still real. That's a signed medical opinion that stands on its own." "A signed opinion with no sample behind it," Min-jae said quietly. "You know how that reads to a board." She did. A retired man's word against a hospital's chart, and the physical proof conveniently stolen. It read like a story someone bought. The layers came off one at a time, and each one was cleaner than the last. First her badge, then her email, then the blood. Someone was not scrambling. Someone was working through a list. "They knew our order of operations," she said slowly. "The badge, then the account, then the lab. That's not Han reacting. That's someone who saw the whole board before we made a move." Min-jae was looking at her, and she watched him arrive at the same place she was already standing. "Say it," she said. He didn't. He looked back down at the calendar, at 3 years of surgeries lined up against 3 years of money, and the name Choi had refused to speak in the car an hour ago was sitting right there under his hand, and he still would not say it out loud. That was the moment something in Simone went cold in a new way. You already knew, she said. He met her eyes. Not knew. Suspected. His jaw was tight. For a long time. How long is a long time? He was quiet. How long, Min-jae? 19 months. The number landed and she understood it before she fully had the words for it. 19 months was not a coincidence. 19 months was the exact length of time he'd been leading. She'd heard it somewhere in the day. Someone said it. He'd been in charge 19 months since his father died. He had suspected the man beside him for as long as he'd worn the crown. You've been investigating him, she said. Your uncle, this whole time. Yes. Quietly. With your own people. A separate operation your clan doesn't know about. His silence was the answer. She sat with it. The car was warm, and the city outside the window kept moving like nothing had ended. When I set my conditions, she said, one of them was that I see everything Choi finds. Raw, unfiltered. You agreed. I did. So when did you plan to tell me you've had a shadow investigation running for a year and a half? Before or after I got fired for a crime he committed? Min-jae turned fully around now, and for the first time all night the control in his face slipped. The investigation is mine. It has nothing to do with your hospital. It has everything to do with my hospital. Her voice rose, and she brought it back down, because a raised voice in a parked car was a gift to whoever was listening. You told me the surgeon wasn't the top. You let me figure it out like it was mine to figure out. You already had a name. I had a fear, he said. Not a name, not proof. A hole in a story about how my father died, and a feeling that the man who profited most was standing closest to the body. He said it, and something behind his eyes went raw. If I'd said his name to you tonight with nothing to hold it up, and I was wrong, I'd have poisoned you against the only family I have left. And if you were right? He didn't answer that either. Choi had gone very interested in the windshield. Simone reached for the door handle. She needed air that wasn't shared with two men who'd known more than they'd told her. Wait, Min-jae said. She waited. She didn't know why she waited. There's more, he said. You should hear it from me and not find it. Choi shifted in the driver's seat, and Simone caught the look that passed between the two men. The look of one man asking another whether the ground was safe to stand on. Tell me, she said. The shell company. Min-jae's hands were flat on his knees now. 19 months ago, I set up a company my uncle doesn't know exists. I've been using it to move money the way he moves money, so I could trace his channels from the inside, match his patterns, find where his reserve cash actually comes from. You built a fake company, Simone said, to catch a man building fake surgeries. To catch a man who I think killed my father and blamed it on someone I then killed for it. His voice cracked once on the last word and he pushed through it. Do you understand what I'm telling you? The official story is that a rival had my father killed, and I found that rival, and I ended him, and I buried my father clean. If I'm right about my uncle, then I killed the wrong man. On his information, he handed me a name, and I believed it because I wanted someone to punish. The car was silent. Simone looked at him for a long moment. She'd spent the whole day reading him as the one steady thing in a rigged building. The man who walked in and asked who slapped the nurse, who pinned a surgeon to the wall and then opened his hand the second she told him to. She'd built her trust on that opened hand. Now she watched a different man surface underneath the first one, a man who'd carried this for a year and a half and let it hollow him out from the inside while he smiled across a table at the person he suspected. You've been eating dinner with him, she said. This whole time, passing him salt, calling him uncle. Every week, he said it without flinching, which was somehow worse. You learn to hold two faces. You learn to want a thing so badly you'd swallow your own tongue rather than say it early and lose the chance to prove it. I know that trick, she said quietly. I've done it to myself for 6 years. Simone had built a whole day around the belief that she was the one being used, that Han used Yoonji's body, that the merger used Han, that the calendar used them all. She had not once considered that she'd walked into an alliance with a man who'd been running his own private war for a year and a half and had folded her into it in a single afternoon without telling her the shape of the thing she'd joined. So the drugging of Yoonji, she said slowly. The fake emergency. That wasn't just about the merger numbers. I don't know yet. He said it, and she believed that part at least. But if he moved on her, on my sister, then it's not only money anymore, it's a message. To me. Then Yoonji isn't a body the scheme needed. Simone felt the floor of the whole day tilt. She's bait. And you've been drawing the man out for 19 months. And tonight, he took the shot. He didn't move. You used me, she said quietly. No heat left in it, which was worse. Not on purpose. I believe that. But you looked at a woman who filed the incident reports and you saw the tool you'd been missing. Someone clean. Someone the board would trust. Someone who could do the medical proof you couldn't touch without exposing your own hands. You didn't lie to me. You just didn't tell me I was walking into a war that started before I ever double-checked a fentanyl dose. Simone. I'm not done. She kept her hand on the door, but she stayed. Every piece of proof I built today runs through your operation now. The vials came to your lab and got stolen from your lab. The neurologist came in your car. The calendar lives on Choi's laptop. If this ever reaches a courtroom or a board, a good lawyer stands up and says the whole thing was manufactured by a mafia boss trying to destroy his uncle. And they'd be half right. That's the problem. They'd be half right. Min-jae's face was stone, but his hands had curled. My evidence is tainted, she said, because it touched you. And I let it touch you, because I thought you were the one thing in this hospital that wasn't already bought. That reached him. She watched it reach him. Her phone buzzed again. She almost didn't look. She was tired in a way that had gone past her body. But she looked. Because looking was the only thing she'd never once failed to do. And that was the whole trouble with her. A message. Not from a number this time. From a name in her contacts she hadn't spoken to in months. A hospital administrator. Mid-level. A man named CO, who signed off on schedules and stayed out of everything. The message was 3 lines. I saw the review packet. There's a statement in it with your signature, admitting to the record errors. Simone, I didn't know you signed anything. Call me before you make it worse. She read it twice. There's a signed confession in the review packet, she said, with my signature, admitting I falsified the records. You didn't sign anything, Min-jae said. No, I didn't. She was already turning the day over, looking for the sheet of paper, the moment a pen had been near her hand. The consult room this morning. Han had slid a document across the table and asked her to reclassify the log as a training note. She'd refused. She'd pushed it back, but her fingers had been on it. Her prints were on it, and a signature was not hard to build for a man who could splice CCTV. They forged it, Choi said. They forged it onto a document I actually touched. She let out a breath. That's the difference. The video, the email, those are clean fakes. No physical trace. This one has my fingerprints on the paper. They took a real object I handled and made it lie. The elegance of it made her almost admire it. Every layer they'd peeled tonight had a purpose she was only now seeing whole. Kill the email so there's no timeline. Steal the blood so there's no proof. Plant the confession so there's a story. When the board sat down Thursday, they wouldn't see a nurse who caught a fraud. They'd see a nurse who committed one and got caught, whose backers were criminals, whose evidence was stolen from a mob lab, who had already confessed in writing. She had been the cleanest thing in the room this morning. By Thursday, she'd be the dirtiest. I need to see that packet, she said. You're suspended, Choi said. You can't pull the packet. Hee-jin can. The name dropped into the car and sat there. The CFO. The woman with the daughter and the briefcase who'd told her to disappear before they made her disappear. She won't help you, Min-jae said. She told you to drop it. She's scared. She's scared because she knows the money source. Simone was thinking fast now. The exhaustion pushed to a back room where it would wait for her later. A scared person who knows the truth is worth more than a brave person who knows nothing. I don't need her brave. I need her to hand me one file. And if she reports that you approached her while suspended, then I'm exactly as finished as I already am. She almost smiled, and it didn't reach anywhere. There's a floor to how far I can fall in one night, and I think I found it around the time my sister's blood got stolen. She heard herself say sister again. She let it go again. Min-jae was watching her with something that wasn't quite guilt and wasn't quite respect. You're still moving. That surprises you. Most people tonight would stop. I stopped once. She said it before she decided to. In Chicago. 6 years ago, I questioned a dose, and a doctor told me to trust him, and I trusted him, and a man died in bed 4 before morning. I stopped that night. I decided never to know a thing and say nothing about it ever again. She looked at him. So no, I don't stop. Stopping is the one thing I'm not capable of. It's not courage. It's a scar. The car was quiet in a different way now. I have to go home, she said. Not because I'm giving up. Because I can't do anything else tonight. And a tired person makes mistakes. And I can't afford a mistake. She got the door open. Cold air came in. Don't send anyone to watch my building. Simone. Condition 1, she said. Nobody in your world does anything until I say. That includes protecting me. I need to be a suspended nurse who goes home alone. If your men are on my street, I'm a suspended nurse guarded by gangsters, and that's the story they want. Let me be small tonight. Min-jae looked like he wanted to argue. He didn't. Choi drives you, he said. No, I take the train. She stepped out onto the sidewalk. The most ordinary thing in the city, a woman on the last train. Let me have it. She shut the door before he could put anyone in front of her. The walk to the station was 8 blocks, and she took them slowly, the bag with the copies heavy on her shoulder. The city didn't care. That was the thing about Seoul at night that she'd come to lean on. 10 million people, and not one of them looking at her. She passed a noodle shop closing its shutters, a convenience store lit like an operating room, a man asleep sitting up on a bench. She kept the bag against her body the whole way. On the platform, she stood behind the yellow line and watched the tunnel for the light. Her phone rang. Hey Jin. She almost dropped it, getting it to her ear. You gave my name to the wrong person, Hee-jin said. No greeting. Her voice was low and fast, a woman speaking from a stairwell or a car. Someone asked me today if you and I had spoken. Someone who shouldn't have known we'd been in the same room. Simone's grip tightened. Who asked? I'm not saying his name on a phone. But he wears a wool coat and he has a scar and he's not the surgeon and he's not the CFO and he is the one you should be afraid of. A breath. I told you to disappear. You didn't. So now I have to decide something, and I hate you for making me decide it. Decide what? The train light appeared in the tunnel, small and growing. There's a set of numbers, Hee-jin said. Inventory codes. I've been logging supply counts for the deal, surgical consumables, per unit, per floor. They never balanced, and I never let myself understand why they never balanced. Last week I understood. Her voice dropped further. They're not inventory codes. They're routing references. Bank routing, account fragments, split across columns so nobody reading a supply sheet would ever see a transfer. I've been keeping the ledger of his money and calling it gauze. The train roared into the station, and Simone pressed the phone hard to her ear, one finger in the other, hunching over the sound. Say that again, she said. The supply sheets are the money trail, Hee-jin said. I have 3 years of them, and if I hand them to you, I'm dead, or my daughter's father gets a visit, or I lose everything I've spent 20 years building. So I'm not handing them to you. The doors opened. People moved past Simone onto the train, and she stood on the platform, unable to move. But I'm telling you they exist, so that when you finally make them come after me the right way, legally, on a subpoena where I have no choice, I can hand them over and pretend I was forced. Do you understand what I'm doing? Simone understood exactly what she was doing. She was drawing the map of her own coercion. She was telling Simone how to compel her so she could survive having helped. I understand, Simone said. Then don't call me again. The line went dead. The doors were closing. Simone got a hand between them, and they shuttered back open, and she stepped onto the train, with her heart going hard. She had a lead, and it was made of numbers she couldn't touch. She had a witness, and she was forbidden to contact her. She had proof that had been stolen, and a confession she never wrote, and an email that no longer existed, and a name nobody would say out loud. She had a badge that turned red at every door. She found a seat and sat down and put the bag on her lap and held it with both arms. Across the car, a poster for the hospital, Miron's blue logo, a family smiling, a line in Korean and English underneath. Care you can trust. She'd walked past it 1,000 times. She looked at it now and something rose in her that she didn't let onto her face, because there were 4 other people in the car, and one of them might be nobody, and one of them might not. The train pulled out of the station. Her phone buzzed one more time. She almost let it go. She looked. Min Jae. One line. Yoon isn't answering his phone. She stared at it. Yoon, the retired neurologist. The one clean expert in the whole day. The sour old man who'd examined Eunji alone and signed a statement and wanted no part of any of it. The man whose word was the last standing piece of proof now that the blood was gone. She typed back, "Since when?" The reply came fast. 2 hours. His car is at his house. His lights are on. He isn't answering the door. The train went into a tunnel and the window turned into a mirror, and she saw her own face in it, lit blue, alone in a car full of strangers, and behind her reflection, the black glass of a tunnel that went on, with no light at either end. She typed one word back and sent it before the signal died. Go. Then the phone lost the network and the screen went dead in her hand, and the train carried her down into the dark under the city with a stolen truth she couldn't prove, a witness she couldn't call, a doctor who wasn't answering, and a name that everyone knew and no one would say, and for the length of that tunnel, with no bars and no way to reach a single person who was still on her side, there was nothing at all she could do but hold the bag against her chest and wait for the light. The train came up into light at Sindang and the bars flooded back 4 at once. Simone was already moving before the doors finished parting. 2 hours of dark had stacked messages against the glass, and one of them mattered more than the rest. Choi, 13 minutes ago, Yoon found. She thumbed it open on the platform and stood still, while the crowd broke around her like water around a post. Found alive. Found at a rest stop off the expressway, sitting in his own car with the engine running, and no memory of the drive. A man had gotten in beside him at the traffic light near his house, shown him a photograph of his granddaughter at her school gate, and said nothing else the entire way. Then the man got out. Yoon had sat there until a highway officer knocked on his window. She read it twice. They didn't take him. They rented him a scare and gave him back. A doctor who signs nothing now, who answers no calls now, who has a granddaughter with a school and a gate and a time she walks through it. His statement still existed on paper. It just had a man standing behind it now. She called Choi. Is he home? With our people. He won't sign a second copy. I don't need a second copy. She started up the stairs toward the street. I need him to have never been the proof in the first place. A pause on the line. Say that again? The blood's gone. Yoon's scared. Both of those only hurt me because I built the case on them. She reached the top and the cold took her. So I stopped building on things they can steal or frighten. I build on the one thing they can't reach. Which is her body. She was already flagging the cab. Yoonji's still in my recovery bay under my chart. Whatever they put in her, it left a shadow no van can drive away. The cab smelled of pine cardboard and old heat. She gave the hospital's back entrance, not the front, and sat with the bag on her knees. Suspended employee, dead badge, red at every door. She turned that over and found the crack in it. They'd killed her access. They hadn't killed her knowledge, and they hadn't thought to move the patient, because the patient was supposed to be a corpse by now, and corpses don't testify. She texted Min Jae one line, "Meet me at the loading dock. Bring nobody who touches her." He was there when the cab pulled in, code open, no men in sight except Choi at the wall with the earpiece. The dragon showed at his collar in the dock light. He looked at her face and didn't ask how she was. "You're not supposed to be inside," he said. "I'm not going inside." She nodded at the service door. "You are, or he is." Choi stepped forward. Her chart's in the bay binder, physical copy, tab 4. I need the labs I ran on admission, the metabolic panel, the tox screen I ordered before the deletion started. Those results printed to the ward printer at 150. Nobody deleted the printout because nobody knew paper existed. She held Choi's eyes. Bottom drawer of the bay station, under the glove boxes. I filed it there myself before my badge died. Why not the system? System's theirs, drawers mine. Choi went. Min Jae stayed. For a moment, neither of them filled the quiet. "Yoon," he said finally. "I heard. They showed him a child." She set the bag down on a pallet. "That's not a man protecting a merger. That's a man who's done this shape of thing before, and knows exactly how much fear a grandfather has in him. My uncle. He said it flat, the first time the word had left his mouth in the open air between them. You still can't prove it. No. Then don't say it inside a building he owns 3 floors of. Choi came back fast, a manila folder against his chest, and she knew from his walk it was there. She took it under the docklight and opened it, and there they were, the admission talk screen, printed 1:50 p.m., her order number at the header, the ward printer's stamp in the corner that no user account controls, line after line of normal, and then not normal. One value flagged, one compound the machine had names for, sitting in Yoonji's blood at a level no piano student swallows by accident. She put her finger on the line. This is the drug. This is the thing that made her hand not close. Printed before they touched the record, on a machine that doesn't log in. She looked up. They stole the vials so no one could test the blood again. They forgot the machine already tested it once and spat it onto paper. Min-jae leaned in over the page. That's a name I don't know. You're not supposed to know it. It's a paralytic analog, short-acting, mimics stroke in the hand, and clears in a day. She tapped the flagged value. It's also not a hospital drug. You don't find this in a pharmacy. You find it where people need a healthy person to look sick on camera and be fine by dinner. Where do you find it? She didn't answer that yet. She was already 3 steps ahead, and the step in front of her was the one that could tip. This paper proves she was drugged. It doesn't prove who ordered it. A board reads this and shrugs. Patient had a rare compound, tragic, unrelated to the nurse who confessed. She closed the folder. I need to walk this from her blood to a hand that bought it, and I can't do that suspended, locked out, with a confession in the packet that says I'm a liar, before I open my mouth. So we clear the confession. We can't clear it. It's got my fingerprints on it. A real object made to lie. You can't untouch a page. She started pacing the short length of the dock. But a forged confession has a maker. Somebody typed my words onto a document I only handled. Somebody had to take the sheet Han slid across that table this morning and run it back through a printer with new language on it. She stopped. That printer has a log. Every printer has a log. And unlike the labs, the confession wasn't a deletion. It was a creation. Creations leave a birthday. Choi spoke for the first time. The review packet was compiled in the CFO's office suite. The confession would have printed on that floor. Hai Jin's floor. Her machines. Simone felt the shape of it lock. Hye Jin, who wouldn't hand over her money trail, who told her to force it by subpoena so she could survive having helped. Hye Jin, whose own printers might have birthed the sheet that framed her, without Hye Jin ever choosing it. A frightened woman, surrounded by other people's crimes printing out on her equipment. I can't reach her, Simone said. She told me never to call again. Then don't call. Min-jae's voice was low. The board meets in 31 hours. She'll be in that building tomorrow. So will the packet. And so will I. Simone picked the bag back up. As a suspended employee, they have to let into her own disciplinary review to answer the charges. That's the one door my dead badge still opens. They built a hearing to bury me. They have to hold the funeral with the body in the room. He almost smiled. It didn't reach anywhere near warm. You're going to walk into the room they built to destroy you. They built it to destroy a nurse who deletes labs and confesses. She lifted the folder. I'm bringing a lab they can't delete and a birthday for their confession. Let them run their own hearing. I'll just change what it's about. Choi's earpiece crackled. He turned half away, listened, came back with his jaw tight. Han's in the building, 3rd floor. He's asked records to pull the recovery ward census. The cold in Simone's chest wasn't the weather. He's looking for her. He's looking for a bed number. Because Yoonji was supposed to be gone, cut, closed, complicated, and quietly slid off the census by now. And instead, she was breathing under Simone's name in a bay that shouldn't still be occupied, and Han had just gone looking for the loose end. He can't find her, Simone said. You can't move her, Choi said. She's a post-collapse patient with a hold order. Move her and she's yours illegally. That's kidnapping, and they'll say it's the mob. Min-jae had gone very still. This was his sister on the far side of a wall, and a man walking floors with a census in his hand. He can't touch her either, Simone said. Fast. before the stillness became a decision. Condition 1. Nobody in your world acts, including now, including him. He is not in my world, Min-jae said. No, he's in mine. She was already moving toward the service door, and this time she didn't stop at it. And in mine, a chief of surgery does not get to walk into a recovery bay and touch a patient who isn't his. Not on paper, not in front of witnesses. I'm still the safety nurse of record on that chart, until a review says otherwise. The review's tomorrow. She pulled the door. Which means tonight, on that floor, I outrank him on exactly one patient. Your badge is dead. My name isn't, she looked back at him once. Keep your men here. All of them. I mean it. The corridor smelled of the same disinfectant it always had, and the fluorescent strip over Bay 6 still flickered on the third pulse the way it had for 2 years. She didn't run. Running is what guilty people do on camera, and there were cameras, and she'd already learned this week what they do to footage of her walking fast. She went at the pace of a nurse who belongs there, because for one more night she did. Han was at the central station with a printout, glasses on, reading. He looked up and the reading stopped. You're suspended, he said. I'm a patient's nurse of record with a hearing in the morning. She kept walking, not toward him, toward the bay. Which of those wins tonight is a lawyer's question. Do you want to be the man who guessed wrong on it? He came around the station. That's my patient. Show me the transfer of care. She reached Bay 6 and put her hand flat on the doorframe, not going in, just standing in the mouth of it so the doorway had her in it. You booked her surgery 12 minutes before she was in the building. Her scans time-stamped before her ambulance. You want to stand at this door and argue whose patient she is, in front of the night charge and 2 aides and that camera. Go ahead. I've got all night. My schedule cleared itself around 9:40. A muscle worked in his jaw. Behind the glasses, the small eyes did arithmetic and came up short. He had a census and a grievance. She had a doorway and a witness list and the specific, dangerous calm of someone with nothing left to lose that they hadn't already lost. Tomorrow you'll be nobody, he said. Tomorrow I'll be in your hearing. She didn't move from the door. Go home, doctor. Sleep. You'll want to be sharp. He held it 3 seconds too long, then turned and walked, the printout crushed to a tube in his fist. She stayed in the doorway until his footsteps died at the elevator, and then a little longer, until her own hand stopped pressing quite so hard on the frame. Simone? A small voice, behind her, from the bed. Yoonji was awake. Propped up, the pendant a dull gold at her throat, her right hand lying open on the blanket. Open, and the fingers had color, and when Simone crossed to her, the girl lifted them and closed them into a fist and opened them again, slow, watching her own hand obey her. It works now, Yoonji said. This afternoon it wouldn't. Now it works. I know. Simone sat on the edge of the chair, folder still under her arm. It was always going to come back. That was the point of it. The point? Yoonji's brow drew in. The doctor said I had a bleed, that I needed surgery tonight or I'd lose the hand. You said no. I heard you say no. Everyone was shouting and you said no, and then my brother came. She looked at her fist. Why would a doctor say I need surgery I didn't need? Simone had promised herself she wouldn't be the one to tell her. It wasn't her story to open, but the girl was looking at her own working hand and asking the exact right question, and lying to her now would make Simone one more adult who managed her. Because you're useful, Simone said quietly. Not you, your name, whose sister you are. Yoonji went still in a way that was very much her brother. Someone wanted you on a table, Simone said. Cut open, so they could put something inside you, and say it was always there. Something that would make trouble for Min-jae. She kept her voice even. A clinical voice. The one that had told families worse than this. The weakness in your hand was a drug. It was given to you to make the surgery look necessary. I stopped the surgery. So the drug wore off, like it was built to. And here you are with a hand that works and no scar. Something inside me, Yoonji repeated. To hurt my brother. To frame him. Yes. The girl looked at the door Han had walked out of. That man booked it. Simone leaned in. Yoonji, I need you to hear the next part, and I need you to understand, I'm not asking you for anything tonight. You've been drugged, you're a patient, you get to just be that. She waited until the dark eyes came back to her. But there may come a day, soon, In a room with people who decide things, where the truth needs a mouth that isn't mine and isn't your brother's. A mouth nobody can call a criminal or a liar, yours. You want me to say what happened? I want you to know that you could. That's all. Tonight, that's all. Yoonji's hand closed again, all 5 fingers, sure. She looked at it a long moment. When I collapsed, she said slowly. Before the ambulance, when they carried me, a man in a white coat looked at my face and said my name before anyone told him my name. I remember thinking that. He knew my name and I was nobody's patient yet. She looked up. That man, the one at the door just now, it was his voice. Simone sat very still, in the whole tangle of stolen blood and erased mail and forged pages. Here was a thing no van could carry off and no printer could birth. A witness who was the crime. Remembering the criminal, say her name before he had any way to know it. You're sure, Simone said. Not because I want it, because it's true. He said Kang Yoonji. The girl's voice didn't shake. Nobody says my full name. My teachers call me Yoonji. He said all of it, like he'd practiced it. She met Simone's eyes. I'll say that. In your room with the people who decide, I'll say he knew my name. Down at the dock, Min Jae would be standing where she'd left him, kept there by 3 conditions and his own word. Simone stood, and something in her chest that had been clenched since the tunnel let go 1 notch. Not victory, nowhere near, but the first brick of a wall she was building out of things they couldn't steal. A printout from a dumb machine, a hand that worked, a girl who remembered a voice. Rest, she told Yoonji. Real rest. I'll be here till the shift change, then I have a hearing to go embarrass some people at. Simone. Yoonji caught her wrist. Her grip was strong now, fully strong. My brother, does he know? That it was aimed at him? He suspects who aimed it. The one he can't say out loud. Yoonji nodded slowly, an old grief moving under a young face. Our uncle. Simone didn't confirm it. She didn't have to. The girl had lived in that house. She stayed the way she said she would. Somewhere past 3, the night charge came by and pretended not to see a suspended nurse in the chair, and Simone understood that too, that not everyone in this building had been bought, that some of them had watched her freeze a fatal order at 10:20 and had opinions about who the liar was. She wrote nothing in the chart she wasn't allowed to write in. She just sat, folder against her ribs, and let the tox printout be real against her arm, and planned the hearing the way she'd once planned nothing and let a man die for it. At the shift change, she found Choi in the stairwell with 2 coffees and no earpiece for once. He stayed, she asked. All night, it cost him. Choi handed her a cup. You should know what it costs a man like that to stand at a dock while another man walks toward his sister with a census. I know exactly what it cost him. It's why I asked. She drank. The confession. Can your people pull the print log off the CFO floor before the hearing? Legally, no. Otherwise, maybe. Legally. She said it firm. Everything from here is legal or it's worthless. They already poisoned the well by running my evidence through your lab. I bring one more stolen thing into that room, and they'll say the whole case is the mob, and they'll be right enough to win. She set the cup down on the rail. The confession has a birthday, and it's on Hae-jin's floor. There's a legal way to a print log. It's called a subpoena. Hae-jin already told me the road out. Force her, so she survives helping. A breath. So I stop trying to get around the law, and I use it. Tomorrow's not just a hearing. It's on the record. Anything said on the record can be demanded after. Choi studied her. You're going to turn your own disciplinary hearing into a deposition. I'm going to walk in accused and walk out with 3 things on the record they'll have to explain under oath. A talk screen that printed itself, a booking that predates a patient, and a chief of surgery who knew a girl's name before he was told it. She picked the coffee back up. Then the subpoenas write themselves. Then Hae-jin gets forced, like she asked. Then her inventory numbers stop being gauze counts and start being what she told me they are. And the man who aimed all of it. Him I don't touch tomorrow. She looked at Choi steady. Tomorrow's Han and the paperwork. The uncle's got a recording somewhere with your boss's name on it, and a father in the ground, and that's Min Jae's to open, not mine, when the board's already choking on the small stuff. She started down the stairs. You don't win the war in the disciplinary hearing. You just make it impossible for them to skip the trial. Min Jae was at the dock still, or again, coat button now against the dawn cold. Choi's word made flesh. He looked like a man who had not slept and had decided several hard things while not sleeping. She woke up, Simone told him. Her hand works. She closed it in front of me. Something moved across his face and he mastered it, and the rest. I told her. She'd already half worked it out. She's yours. She's not slow. Simone stopped in front of him. She remembered something. When she collapsed, before any chart existed, Han looked at her face and said her full name. Kang Eun-ji. All of it. Before a single person had told him who she was. Min Jae's hand closed at his side, the signet ring catching the gray light. He knew. He knew before the ambulance logged her, which means he wasn't handed a patient. He was handed a target, in advance, by name. She let it sit. She'll say it, in the hearing, on the record. Your sister will stand in a room and tell them a surgeon knew her name before he had any way to. No, the word came out fast and hard. She stays out of it. That was the whole... He stopped himself. The funeral promise. Keep her clean. Keep her outside. She watched him collide with it. That's her choice now, not yours, Simone said gently. She made it lying in a bed with a hand that just started working again. You don't get to protect her out of the one true thing she's got to give. She held his eyes. You've spent 19 months mistaking a cage for a shield. She's 24. Let her testify to her own poisoning if she wants to. That's not the clan reaching for her. That's her reaching back. He looked away, toward the gray wall, toward the city coming up out of the dark. For a long moment he said nothing, and she let him have it, because she'd asked him to hand over the one thing he'd built his whole leadership around protecting. When's the hearing? He said at last. 9. Council room, 4th floor. They deactivated my badge and scheduled my execution in the same building. Efficient. She hitched the bag higher. I walk in at 9 as the accused. I need Haijin to be somewhere in that building at the same time, near her floor, where a subpoena served on the record can reach her before she's coached or moved. Choi can put eyes on her without a hand on her. Eyes only. Condition 1. She almost smiled. You people really do have to be told twice. Once, he said. You've told me a great many things once, and I've kept all of them. That landed somewhere she didn't have time for. She stepped back toward the cab that was pulling in for the day shift drop. Simone, he said her name the way his sister had, the full weight of it. The tox sheet. If it walks the way you say, from her blood to a hand that bought it, where does the hand lead? She had the answer. She'd had it since the dock light hit the flagged line, since a paralytic that no pharmacy stocks turned up in a conservatory student's arm. She just hadn't said it, because saying it in the wrong building was how you lost. It leads to whoever had a reason to make your sister a message, she said. And there's exactly one man in your life who could reach a drug like that, and a printer like that, and a doctor's granddaughter, and your father, and still sit at your table. She got the cab door open. But I'm not saying his name in his building either. I learned that from you. Min Jae stood in the dock mouth as the cab pulled her away, one hand at his collar where the dragon rose in the cold, and for the first time all week, the look on his face wasn't suspicion or grief. It was the look of a man who had just been handed a floor to stand on. Simone opened the folder on her knees as the city slid by, the talk sheet, the birthday she'd chase, the girl's remembered voice. 8 hours to the hearing, suspended, locked out, confessed against, and for the first time since the tunnel, ahead of them by one clean page. She closed the folder. 4th floor, she told the driver. Miran, I've got a room to change the subject in. The elevator to the 4th floor smelled of floor wax and fresh paint. Simone wrote it alone. She kept the manila folder flat against her chest, both hands over it, the way a person holds a thing they refuse to set down in a room full of hands. At the 4th floor doors, she waited 1 second longer than she needed to, then she stepped out. The council room had glass walls. She could see them before they could stop pretending. 6 people at a long, pale table, water bottles, a laptop already open to a paused frame of grainy footage. She recognized the frame. It was her, at a workstation, 10:14 in the morning, in a story that never happened. A young man in a lanyard tried to seat her at the far end, away from the screen. She sat where she wanted instead, at the corner nearest the laptop, close enough to read the timestamp on it. "Miss Carter," the chair said, gray suit, reading glasses pushed up. "This is a disciplinary review, not a hearing. You understand the distinction." "I understand you scheduled it 2 days before a vote," Simone said. Nobody wrote that down. The door at the back opened. A man came in without hurry and took the empty chair at the head, the one that had been left empty on purpose. Wool overcoat folded over his arm. He set it on the seat beside him like a guest. The scar near his right eyebrow caught the overhead light when he turned his head. She had never been in a room with Dae-sung. She knew him the way you know weather from a window, by what it had already done to her. The dead badge, the erased inbox, the stolen blood, all of it had passed through this man's quiet, and here he was, sitting in on a nurse's disciplinary review, as if he had wandered in from a board meeting down the hall. "I represent the incoming partner's interest," he said to no one who had asked. "I'll only listen." He would not only listen, she knew that already. The chair cleared his throat and read the charges. Falsification of clinical records, unauthorized alteration of patient labs, obstruction of a scheduled procedure. Each charge had a document number. Each document number, she knew, pointed at a thing that had been built to point back at her. "You'll be given the chance to respond," the chair said. "Do you have representation?" "I have a printer," Simone said. She opened the folder. She did not hand it across. She laid one sheet face up and turned it toward the table, so the ward printer stamp showed. "This is an admission talk screen. It printed at 1:50 in the afternoon, on the recovery ward, under my order number, before anyone deleted anything. It flags one compound, a short-acting paralytic analog. It mimics a stroke in the hand and clears in a day." She let them look. "No pharmacy in this building stocks it." Someone brought it in. A woman 2 seats down leaned to read. Dae-sung did not lean. "That document is not in the review packet," the chair said. "No," Simone said. "It printed to a ward machine that doesn't ask who you are. Paper doesn't log in. That's why it's the only thing in this room nobody had a chance to touch." The woman 2 seats down was still reading it. She had a hospital lanyard and a clinician's habit of moving her lips over drug names. Simone watched her reach the flagged compound and stop. "You'd know that name if you worked a floor," Simone told her. Quiet, direct, one nurse to whoever this woman used to be. "It isn't a treatment. Nobody orders it to help a patient. You order it to make a patient look like something they're not." The woman glanced at the chair, then set the sheet down as if it had warmed in her hand. "That's not evidence of anything," the chair tried. "I know," Simone said. "That's the interesting part." She laid the second sheet beside the first. The OR booking. This procedure was authorized at 1:40. The patient was logged into the building at 1:52. The room was booked for a girl who was still in an ambulance. She tapped the timestamp once and took her finger away. "You can't consent a body that isn't here yet. Unless you already know it's coming." For the first time, the chair looked at the laptop instead of at her, as if the paused footage might tell him what to do with his face. "Consent forms get pre-filled," a man near the middle said, not quite believing himself. "Administratively, it happens." "Pre-filled by whom?" Simone asked. The patient was unconscious in a moving vehicle. Her brother hadn't reached the building. "Show me the signature on that form, and I'll show you a hand that couldn't have been in the room." She let it breathe. "Or subpoena the room booking terminal and read who was logged into it at 1:40. I already know. I'm giving you the chance to find out the honest way." Nobody moved to take the chance. Dae-sung spoke into the quiet. "Timestamps can be edited." His voice was even, almost bored. "This entire packet, Miss Carter, exists because you've shown a talent for editing timestamps." "Then subpoena the print logs," Simone said. "Every page has a birthday. Pull the machine that made mine, and pull the machine that made yours." Something moved at the edge of the room. Han Sung-won had come in through the side door and stayed standing against the wall, white coat, hands in his coat pockets. He had the look of a man who had rehearsed being calm and was watching the rehearsal fall apart. The chair tried to steer. "Miss Carter, the specific allegation is that at 10:14 you accessed a workstation and altered incident documentation. We have footage." "You have a workstation," Simone said. "I was at it. I was reading a duplicate fentanyl order under a prescriber ID that wasn't mine. The footage is real, the caption is the lie. She looked at the paused frame, then away from it, deliberately, because a person who is guilty cannot stop looking at the evidence, and she wanted them to see that she could. Play the 30 seconds before your clip. You cut it where the story needed cutting. We don't have the 30 seconds before. No, she said. You don't. It was erased with the rest of my mailbox last night. A pen clicked. Somebody's water bottle sweated a ring onto the pale wood. Dae-sung folded his hands. This is a great deal of theater for a suspended employee. He said it gently. That was the thing about him she would remember. How gently he did it. You've involved yourself with people you don't understand, Miss Carter. You've let them drive you to labs, put you in cars. You've accepted the help of a man whose family is a criminal enterprise. He let the words sit. Every document you've touched has passed through his hands. A neurologist he summoned, a sample his people carried, a calendar his security officer built on his laptop. Do you imagine a court would call that clean? There it was. The thing she had already said to Min-jae in the dark, in the car, spoken back to her now by the man who needed it to be true. She had known her evidence was tainted. She had not known how it would feel to hear the enemy agree with her out loud, in daylight, to a table full of people whose votes could bury her. Her mouth went dry. She reached for the water bottle in front of her, then stopped her hand before it got there, because a shaking hand pouring water is a story too. You've done your homework, she said. I've done nothing but listen, Dae-sung said. As I promised. She held his eyes a moment longer than was comfortable for the room. He didn't look away, and neither did she. It wasn't a contest. It was a measurement. Both directions. He was learning what she'd let herself understand. She was learning that he'd expected a frightened woman and gotten a patient one, and that the difference annoyed him in a place he kept very still. You keep saying his hands, she said. You've never once said the name of the man you mean. In a room this full of lawyers, that's a careful silence. She tilted her head, almost as careful as never signing your own name to a transfer. The old watch on his wrist did not move. He let the line pass through him without a ripple, which told her more than a flinch would have. The chair seemed relieved to have someone confident in the room. Miss Carter, given the complications around the provenance of your materials, the counsel is prepared to be reasonable. And there it was, the second door opening, the one she'd been waiting for. Han pushed off the wall. He came to the table but did not sit. He set a single page down in front of the chair and slid it the last few inches with 2 fingers. The same 2-finger slide she had watched him use on a different page, in a different room, that morning that felt like a year ago. A resolution, Han said. His voice had found itself again. Miss Carter acknowledges procedural errors in her documentation. Errors, not intent. She withdraws the obstruction complaint regarding the surgical transfer. In exchange, the misconduct finding is reduced to a training matter, the suspension is lifted, and she returns to duty. He almost smiled. No one loses their license. No one loses their name. She read it upside down. It was clean. It was well written. It was the kind of document that looks like mercy and is a leash. A training matter, she repeated. A fresh start, Han said. The word landed strangely in his mouth. A man who had raised his hand to her across a gurney, offering her a fresh start, as if the slate were his to wipe. She watched his fingers rest on the edge of the page. Steady now. He'd found his footing again the moment paper was involved. Han was only ever calm when the violence had a form to hide inside. And the patient in Bay 6? Recovers, goes home, forgets a frightening day. He spread his hands. Everyone recovers, Miss Carter. That's what a hospital is for. She understood the shape of it completely then, and the understanding was worse than the threat. If she signed, Yoonji's talk screen became a paperwork error. The booking that predated the patient became a scheduling glitch a training note would swallow. The girl in Bay 6 would never testify, because there would be nothing left to testify to. Simone herself would have signed the drugging into a clerical mistake. And the surgery they never got to perform, the one meant to open a sedated girl up and leave something inside her, would vanish as if it had only ever been a bad afternoon. Because that was what the surgery had been for. Not to heal a stroke that didn't exist. Not to treat a hand that closed fine by evening. It had been a delivery, a sealed thing, hospital grade, meant to ride into Yoonji's body under anesthesia and stay there. A Hanyul batch device with a serial that traced to a fraud shipment, planted inside the sister of the man they wanted to destroy. Cut the girl open, leave the evidence in her, sew her shut, and in 6 months, when someone went looking, they would find a Kang carrying contraband hardware in her own tissue, and every road out of it led to her brother's door. Yoonji had never been a patient. She had been an envelope, and the address on the envelope was Min Jae. Simone had stopped the delivery. She had canceled the transfer over a gurney and pushed the girl into an empty bay with her own hands. That was the crime on the page in front of her. Obstruction. She had obstructed a man from planting a bomb in a sleeping girl. Take your time, Han said, misreading her stillness. I know it's a lot to give up. The cause, the noise, but you have a career, 2 years here, references, a pause, tuned. People who depend on you. Say her name, Simone said. Han blinked. Whose? You keep saying people. Say one. He didn't. He wasn't stupid. He knew a nurse in a corner was still a nurse who documented everything. Daesung intervened smoothly, a man moving a conversation off a curb. Sign or don't, Miss Carter, but understand your position. Your evidence is compromised by association. Your record is gone. Your access is revoked. The only clean thing in this room is the offer in front of you, and it will not survive the morning. He checked the old watch on his wrist without needing to. The board reviews the safety report tomorrow. After that, none of this matters. You matter today. You will not matter tomorrow. She looked at the watch. Inherited, heavy, older than the man wearing it. She thought about how many things this family passed down, watches, companies, lies about who killed the father. Then she made herself stop, because there was a door in this room she had not let herself open, and she could feel it now, behind her, wide. Because Min Jae had known. He had told her, in the car, past midnight, that he'd suspected his uncle for 19 months. That he'd built a fake company Daesung didn't know about and run it in the dark to trace the reserve cash. That he might have avenged his father on the word of the man who killed him. He had told her all of it after she was already inside, after her badge was dead, after her blood was stolen, after she'd become the clean, board-trusted tool a criminal needed and couldn't be himself. He had folded her into a 19-month war and let her think she'd walked in on her own. She had used the word tainted at him and meant the evidence. Sitting here, with Daesung using the same word back like a scalpel, she understood he'd tainted more than the paperwork. He'd tainted the one thing she'd built her whole self on after Chicago, the plain, unglamorous power of a record no one could argue with. Now everything she carried had a boss's fingerprints on it, and the boss had put them there before she got a vote. The room waited. 6 council members, a scarred man, a surgeon with a pen. Can I ask a question? Simone said, before I answer yours. The chair nodded, grateful for procedure. She turned to Daesung. Why a hospital? She kept her voice level, curious. A nurse asking about a chart. You have money. You have people. If you wanted to end your nephew, there are cheaper ways than a merger and a surgical suite. Why go through a girl's body? For half a second, less, something behind Daesung's eyes adjusted. Not fear, calculation. The look of a man confirming that the person across the table had seen more than the paperwork said she should. I represent a partner's interest, he said again, softer. I don't answer clinical questions. No, Simone agreed. You answer to a board. Tomorrow. She let the folder fall closed under her hands. I'll remember that. Han set the pen down on the resolution and slid it the last inch, blade quiet. Miss Carter. She looked at the pen. She looked at the page. Everyone in the room leaned, very slightly, toward the moment where the difficult woman becomes reasonable. She stood up. The chair started. The council hasn't. You said respond. Simone tucked the folder back against her chest, both hands over it. This is my response. I'm not signing a training note over a drugged patient. I'm not calling a booking that predates the ambulance a scheduling error. And I'm not reducing a man saying a girl's full name before anyone told it to him into a rounding mistake. She looked at Han when she said it. His jaw moved once, a muscle finding the bad news early. You have nothing that survives a courtroom, Daesung said. No gentleness left in it now. A statement of fact, filed. Then subpoena me, Simone said. Put me under oath. Put my print logs under oath. Put his. She nodded at Han. And yours. She was already turning. You keep telling me I won't matter tomorrow. Funny, you scheduled a whole morning to a nurse who doesn't matter. She walked to the glass door. The young man in the lanyard didn't know whether to open it or block it, and did neither. She opened it herself. Ms. Carter. Dae-sung. Behind her. Unhurried again. The weather back to gentle. Go home. Sleep. You've had a long night. Whoever's been driving you around, let him drive you home. You've done enough. He meant it as the last word. He meant her to hear that he knew about the car, the man, the whole shape of her help, and that none of it had a floor under it. She stopped in the doorway. She didn't turn all the way. That's the difference between us, she said, to the glass, to the hallway, loud enough for the table. You think I've been getting rides. She stepped through. I've been keeping receipts. The door swung shut on its own weight. Through the glass she could see them start to talk without sound, the chair's mouth moving, Han bending to say something at Dae-sung's ear, Dae-sung looking not at either of them but at the door she'd walked out of, the way a man looks at a thing he has revised his estimate of. She made it to the elevator before her hands started. It came up through the arms first, then the folder shivered against her chest, and she pressed it flatter and it kept going, and she let it, because there was no camera in the elevator and no counsel and no one who needed a steady nurse. She had walked out. She had walked out of the only offer that lifted the suspension, cleared the record, gave her back the badge and the name and the 2 years. She had walked out of the exit. The doors opened on the lobby. She stepped out and the shaking stopped, the way it always stopped when there were people, because that was the trick her body had learned in Chicago and never unlearned. Fall apart only where it's private. Hold the line where it counts. Her phone buzzed. Min-jae. She stared at his name until it stopped. Then it buzzed again. She answered, walking. I'm out. I know. His voice was low, close, the front seat of a car somewhere near. Choi has eyes on the floor. You walked. I walked. A silence with weight in it. You could have signed the suspension. I know what I could have done. It came out harder than she meant, and she let it stay hard. You knew, Min-jae. 19 months. You knew what he was before you ever put your sister's chart in my hands. You knew what this table was going to feel like. Simone, you built a company he can't see, and you never told me it was between us in the car. I walked into your war thinking it was mine. She reached the revolving door and stopped, because a person cannot fight and revolve at the same time. He said it to my face. Every road out of my evidence goes through you. And he's right. That's the part that guts me. He's right. Then let me fix it, Min-jae said. Let me put men on Han tonight. One night. He signs a real statement by morning, and none of this. No. The word landed flat and final. Condition 1. Nobody in your world touches him. Not tonight. Not for me. Not to save my badge. The second you break that, everything I've got becomes exactly what your uncle just called it. She pressed her forehead to the cold glass of the door. I have to be able to say no one leaned on him. I have to. It's the only thing I've got left that's clean, and it's mine, not yours. She heard him breathe. She heard, under it, the man who had pinned a surgeon to a wall and asked who slapped the nurse, learning again that the one person he wanted to protect kept ordering him to stand still. Where will you go? He said finally. Not a question about strategy. About her. She looked out through the revolving glass at the gray morning, the taxi rank, the poster on the far wall that promised care you could trust. Down, she said. It only goes down from here for a while. That's fine. I know the way. She pushed into the door and the lobby began to turn away behind her. Get Choi to the CFO floor and keep his hands in his pockets. When I have a subpoena, I want the print logs still sitting exactly where they are, untouched, boring, waiting. Nobody helps me. That's how I win. That's a hard way to win. It's the only way that holds. The door delivered her onto the sidewalk, into the cold she didn't feel. I'll call you when I have a lawyer who's never met you. She hung up before he could answer, because if she let him say her name one more time in that voice, she would sit down on the curb of a hospital she was no longer allowed to enter, and she could not afford to sit down yet. Behind her, 4 floors up, A scarred man was already making a call of his own. She didn't need to hear it to know its shape. By noon, there would be a version of Simone Carter moving through the right ears. The unstable American nurse. The one who fabricated records. The one caught on camera. The one who'd fallen in with gangsters and refused a generous hand. The one whose word meant nothing now. He would not raise his voice to do it. He never raised his voice. He would simply let the story down into the water and let it sink toward tomorrow's vote. And by the time the board sat, the safety report she'd spent 2 years earning the right to write would arrive under the name of a liar. Simone walked to the taxi rank. She got in the first cab. The driver asked where. She didn't have a home she trusted anymore, or a badge, or an inbox, or a vial, or an expert who'd sign, or a single piece of paper that a good lawyer couldn't call the work of the man in the car. She had a girl in Base 6 who remembered a voice. She had a CFO who'd talk under a subpoena she didn't yet have the standing to demand. She had a printer, and she had a scar that wouldn't let her go home and sleep the way the gentleman had told her to. A library, she said. The big one. With the legal desk. The cab pulled out. In the side mirror, the hospital slid backward and got small, and the poster in the lobby window shrank to a blue smudge, and Simone put the folder on her knees and both hands flat on top of it, and let the shaking finish while nobody who mattered could see. It only goes down from here. She'd said it to make it true, so it couldn't surprise her. It was about to prove her right. The legal desk at the library had a number machine and a woman behind glass who did not look up. Simone took ticket 41 and sat between a man disputing a lease and a mother with a folder of school letters. She waited her turn like everyone else. It was the first ordinary thing she had done in 2 days, and it steadied her more than any promise ever had. When her number lit, a volunteer lawyer named Ji Woo waved her over. Retired, gray cardigan, reading glasses pushed up into her hair. She had spent 30 years in a district prosecutor's office and now gave 4 hours a week to strangers. Simone put nothing on the desk at first. She asked one question. If I have proof a hospital drugged a patient and I can't touch the records that would confirm who ordered it, can a court force those records open? Ji-woo folded her hands. That's what subpoenas are for. Even against a hospital in the middle of a merger? Especially then. The old woman's mouth tucked at one corner. Sit properly. Start at the beginning. Simone started at the talk screen. Only the talk screen. Nothing about clans. Nothing about a boss. Nothing about a man in a wool coat. A drug not stocked by any pharmacy, printed to a ward printer at 10 to 2, under her own order number, filed in a drawer no login touched. A booking made 12 minutes before the patient entered the building. Ji-woo stopped her once. Who carried the samples out for testing? A private party. Then the samples are worthless. She said it flatly, the way a surgeon names a tumor. But the printout isn't. The printout never left the building's own system. Neither did the booking. She pulled a legal pad toward her and began writing. You don't need the blood. You need the machine that made the paper. Simone felt something unlock in her chest. For 2 days, every path had run back through Min-jae's hands and gone dirty. Here was one that had never left the hospital's own walls. There's a confession, Simone said. With my signature, I never wrote it. It printed somewhere. Ji-woo's pen paused. Printers keep logs. Where did it print? The finance floor. Then that log has a birthday on it, and a time, and a device name. She wrote 3 lines and turned the pad around. A verified whistleblower petition. You file it under the patient safety statute, not employment. It goes to a judge, not to your counsel. A judge can order the print logs preserved tonight, before anyone reformats a drive. Tonight. If I walk it to the duty clerk myself. Ji-woo took her glasses down from her hair and looked at Simone properly for the first time. You understand they'll come for your name harder once they know a court is looking. They already came for my name, Simone said. This is the first time I get to answer under oath. They worked for 2 hours. Ji-woo drafted the petition in her own hand, then typed it on the desk's old terminal. Simone signed as complainant. She attached photographs from her 4 backup accounts, the talk screen, the booking, the access log, as exhibits, and swore to their provenance line by line. At 6 that evening, Ji-woo pulled on her coat, put the petition in a plastic sleeve, and walked out into the street toward the courthouse 2 blocks down. Don't go back to your apartment, she said over her shoulder. Not tonight. A hearing this fast rattles people. Rattled people do stupid things. Simone did not go back to her apartment. She called Min-jae from a payphone bolted to the library wall because her own phone had a court date now and she wanted it clean. He answered on the first ring. "A judge is reading a preservation order tonight," she said. "Print logs on the finance floor. The booking terminal. Everything freezes at midnight." A pause. She could hear the car around him, the low idle. "You did that from a library." "I did that from a line, with a ticket, like a person." She pressed the receiver closer. "Keep Choi's hands in his pockets. If anyone from your world so much as photographs that floor tonight, the whole thing turns to poison. Legal or worthless. That hasn't changed." "It hasn't changed," he agreed. Then, quieter. "Where are you sleeping?" "Somewhere you can't send a car." She hung up before he could make it into an argument. The subpoena landed at Miran at 9 the next morning. Simone was not there to see it, but Jiwoo called to describe it, delighted in the dry way of a woman who had spent a career watching powerful people receive paper they could not refuse. A court officer had walked into the administrative suite, asked for the records custodian by name, and served a preservation and production order for the finance floor print logs, the OR booking terminal history, and the badge access records for a 48-hour window. Copies to be produced within 72 hours. Originals frozen immediately. "They tried to say the merger review had its own process," Jiwoo said. The officer told them a district court outranks a bank. A short, satisfied breath. "Your CFO signed the receipt." Her hand was shaking. The officer said, "Interesting detail." Simone's own hand tightened on the phone. Hey Jin, positioned near her own floor by a boy with an earpiece who never touched a thing, and now handed the one thing she had asked for out loud in a stairwell. A reason on paper to talk. "I need to see her," Simone said. "Before the production deadline, legally." "You can't approach her privately, you're a party," Jiwoo thought. "But a witness can approach a lawyer. Give her my number. Tell her a subpoena protects the one who was compelled, not the one who volunteered. She'll understand the difference. People in finance always do." Simone got word to Hae-jin the only clean way she had. She left the message with the court, in the record, as a request that the custodian's testimony be taken under protection. Then she waited, and the waiting was its own kind of work. Hae-jin called Jiwoo's desk that afternoon. They met the next morning in a witness room at the courthouse. A table, 4 chairs, a recorder, and Jiwoo between them, so no one could later say Simone had coached a word. Hae-jin came in champagne gray, her hair in the low bun, glasses on. She set her leather briefcase on the table and did not open it. "I was told a subpoena means I didn't choose this," she said. "You didn't," Jiwoo said. "The court chose it. You obey. That's all anyone can ever say about you." Hae-jin looked at Simone for a long moment, then she opened the briefcase. Inside were 3 years of inventory sheets, surgical consumables, per unit, per floor, gauze counts, suture lots, catheter tallies, column after column of numbers that meant nothing to anyone who ran a supply room. Simone had seen them once, in a stairwell, and been told what they really were. "You said they're bank references," Simone said quietly. Hae-jin turned the top sheet so the recorder's light fell on it. "This column. Everyone reads it as case quantity." Her finger moved down the figures. "The first 4 digits are a routing number. The next block is an account fragment. The last 2 are a transfer sequence." Her voice was steady now that it was on the record, the way people get steady once the thing they feared most is finally happening. "I built it this way because a supply sheet gets audited by a nurse manager, never by a forensic accountant. Nobody counts gauze twice." Jiwoo leaned in. "Who told you to build it this way?" "No one told me the method. That was mine." Hae-jin swallowed. The instruction was only ever the same 3 words. "Keep the numbers moving." She looked up. "From the man who came to my office in a wool coat and asked whether the nurse and I had spoken." "Say the name," Jiwoo said gently. "For the record." Hae-jin said it. "Kang Dae-sung." The recorder ran. No one spoke for a moment. Simone kept her face still, but under the table her nails found her palm, because for 2 days that name had been a thing everyone knew, and no one would sit down in front of a machine that remembered. "He never signed a transfer," Hae-jin went on, unprompted now, the dam gone. He signed nothing. He read the numbers off my sheets and told the money where to go from a phone that isn't in his name. The sheets are the only place his instructions ever touched paper. She closed the briefcase. I kept every one. I told myself it was for an audit. It was for this. Jiwoo produced a chain of custody form. Heejin signed the sheets over to the court, not to Simone, not to any private party. The recorder captured the handoff. 3 years of a money trail crossed the table and became evidence no lawyer could call manufactured, because a subpoena had pulled it and a court reporter had watched. Simone walked out of that room with nothing in her own hands and everything in the record. It was the strangest kind of victory. She had spent 2 days learning that anything she carried could be stolen, frightened, or spliced, so she had stopped carrying. She let the court carry it instead. That evening, the preservation order paid its second debt. The finance floor print logs came back to the judge, and Jiwoo called her from the courthouse steps. "Your confession has a birthday," she said. "It printed at 11:40 at night, on the finance floor device, the night you were suspended, not from your account, from a workstation that badges to the CFO suite." A pause. "The same night the document you actually touched, the one with your fingerprints, was in the building. Someone married your real prints to a printed lie, and the printer wrote down exactly when they did it. Han's login? No, that's the interesting part." Jiwoo's voice sharpened. "It printed under a temporary credential issued that afternoon, issued to authorize a visitor's access to the executive floor. The authorizing signature on the credential request is Dae-sung's." Simone closed her eyes. The frame had been built too clean under Han's name, and she had said so from the start. Han was a fall guy, the deletions too tidy, the login too obvious. Now the machine had caught the hand above him, reaching down to print the last piece himself, impatient, one move too many. "He touched it," she said. "He touched the paper trail of it, in a system a court now owns." Jiwoo exhaled. "Ms. Carter, you have a case. Not a story, a case." The board vote was the next morning. It was not the disciplinary council this time. It was the full merger review, the body that would say yes or no to letting reserve money buy its way into a hospital, valued on a safety report that was supposed to have buried Simone by now. Bank representatives, 2 outside directors, the hospital chair, and, at the far end, styling himself a listener, Dae-sung in the wool overcoat with his inherited watch on the table. Simone was there because a court had reinstated her standing to appear. Not her badge, not yet. Her standing. Jiwoo sat beside her with the exhibits. Yoon-ji was there because she had chosen to be. She came in a lavender cardigan, her mother's pendant at her throat, her brother a careful step behind her, and Choi behind him. She was 24 and she looked younger, and she walked to the witness chair the way she must have once walked to a recital, chin level, hands loose, the walk of someone who has decided to be seen. Min-jae had tried, one last time in the corridor, to stand between her and the door. Simone had watched it happen. He had put his hand up, not to stop her body, but to stop the moment, and Yoon-ji had looked at the hand and then at his face and said, "You promised our mother you'd keep me clean. Clean isn't hidden, Oppa. Clean is telling the truth," and he had lowered the hand. He had mistaken a cage for a shield for 19 months, and his sister had just told him the difference in one sentence, in a hallway, and he let her pass. She testified plainly. The chair asked her to describe the day she collapsed. She described the rehearsal, the hand that would not close, the ambulance. Then she described the thing no chart could hold. "Before anyone asked my name," Yoon-ji said, "a man in a white coat said it. My full name, Kang Eun-ji. He read it off nothing. There was no chart yet. I was on the stretcher, and he said my whole name like he already knew I was coming." "Would you know that voice again?" Jiwoo asked. "I've known it since." Eun-ji turned her head. "It's his." She looked at Han, who sat along the wall in his white coat, and she did not waver. The room followed her eyes. Han's jaw worked once. He had been kept alive and employed and free for 2 days by a nurse's condition, kept in place precisely so he would still be sitting here when a girl with a pendant pointed at him under oath. "That's the voice that said my name before I existed on paper," Yoon-ji said. "That's the man who booked a room to cut me open 12 minutes before I was in the building." The clinician director had the talk screen in front of him. He read the flagged compound aloud. the paralytic analog no pharmacy stocked, and his voice thinned. Jiwoo laid the booking beside it. 140, authorized, against a patient logged at 152. Then the print log, the confession with its 1140 birthday, the visitor credential signed by the man at the end of the table. Dae-sung did not move for the talk screen. He did not move for the booking. When the visitor credential went up on the screen with his signature enlarged beside it, he reached for his watch, turned it a quarter inch on the table and said, "A signature authorizing floor access is not a confession to a crime." "No," Jiwoo agreed, "but it puts your hand on the printer that made a forgery on the night it was made. The court will decide what that is." "The court," Dae-sung repeated, and for the first time something crossed the flat dark of his eyes. He looked at Simone. "You've been busy for a woman with no badge." "I told you," Simone said. "I've been keeping receipts." Then Min-jae stood. He had said nothing the whole session. He had sat behind his sister with his hands folded, the collar of his dark shirt high, and he had let the nurse and the lawyer and the girl do the work, which was itself a kind of surrender for a man who had run his own war for 19 months. Now he set a small recorder on the table in front of the chair. Not Choi's laptop, not anything that had passed through a mob lab, a cassette recorder, old, the kind a man of his father's generation would have used. "This is my father's voice," he said. "Recorded 3 years ago, 6 weeks before he died. My people did not make it. It has been in a safe deposit box under a name none of you know since the day he was buried." He looked at Dae-sung. "I found it 4 months ago. I have been waiting for a room where it would matter." He pressed play. The voice that came out was thin and tired and unmistakably an old man's, and it named things. It named a reserve fund the clan believed was war money and that the old man had discovered was being drained. It named the brother who managed it, it named the amount, and it named the fear, that if he moved against Dae-sung openly, the clan would split, so he was documenting quietly, building proof, and if anything happened to him, his son should know it had not been a rival, it had been family. "My father was killed," Min-jae said into the silence after the tape stopped, "and I was told a rival did it, and I was given a name, and on that name I acted." His voice did not break, but it went very level, the levelness of a man holding a thing that could break him. "I have carried for 19 months that I killed the man who killed my father. This tape means I killed a man," Dae-sung pointed me at, "to bury this." He set his hand flat beside the recorder. "I did not avenge my father. I did my uncle's cleaning. He knew it. He let me carry it, because a nephew soaked in the wrong blood is a nephew who does what he's told." The room had gone so quiet, Simone could hear the recorder's reels ticking as they stopped. Dae-sung stood too, unhurried. "That tape proves an old man's paranoia, nothing more." "It proves the fund," Jiwoo said. "The fund the CFO's 3 years of sheets trace, dollar by dollar, into accounts the court is already opening. The tape names the drain. The sheets show the drain. The bank in this room can match them before lunch." One of the bank representatives, who had said nothing all morning, was already turning the inventory exhibits over, reading the columns the way Hye-jin had taught the record to read them. His pen stopped on a routing number. He looked up and he looked at Dae-sung and he closed his folder. That was the moment it turned. Not the tape, not the talk screen, not even the girl. The moment a banker closed a folder. The chair called the vote. The merger was rejected. Unanimous. The reserve money would not buy a share of anything valued on a safety report that had just been proven false in front of them. The bank representatives withdrew their institution's role that afternoon and, by the account Jiwoo relayed later, froze the accounts the inventory sheets had mapped before Dae-sung reached the ground floor. The contracts the clan had lined up behind the deal, the vendor agreements, the front companies waiting to look legitimate, collapsed with the valuation, because untraceable money is only worth something while it stays untraced, and a court had just traced all of it. Han was arrested in the corridor outside the council room. 2 officers, no drama. The paralytic analog, the booking that predated the patient, a girl's voice putting his name to hers before any chart existed, and now his printing credential riding under his own login through the deletions. The case that had been too clean under his name became a case against him precisely because Simone had left him in place to keep making it. He looked at her once as they turned him. She said nothing. She had promised not to touch him. She had kept it, and it had cost him everything. Daesung did not run. Men like Daesung do not run. They calculate, and the calculation that morning came up empty. He was detained at the building's entrance on the court's hold, while the accounts and the tape and the sheets were sorted into charges. The scar near his right eyebrow was the last of him Simone saw, turned half toward the glass doors, a man revising an estimate one final time, and finding no number left that helped him. It was over the way these things end, not with one blow, but with a folder closing, a vote counted, 2 arrests, and money going still. Min-jae found her on the plaza afterward. The winter light was flat and ordinary. Yoon-ji stood a little away with Choi, turning her mother's pendant in her fingers, alive and clean and seen. "It's done," he said. "It started," Simone corrected. "Trials take years, but yes, the part that needed you and me is done." He was quiet. Then he did the thing she had not expected, the thing that made it real. He took a folder from inside his coat and held it out. "The Shell Company," he said. 19 months of moving money to trace him from the inside. Everything it holds. I'm handing it to your lawyer, into the court, in my name. Not laundered clean, not hidden, named. He didn't lower the folder when she hesitated. "I'm renouncing the holding votes the clan carries into any legitimate business. In writing, filed. And I'm funding protection for the CFO and the neurologist and the night charge who pretended not to see a suspended nurse. Concrete things, money with a name on it and a purpose on the receipt." Simone looked at the folder and did not take it. "Give it to Jiwoo, not to me. My name stays out of your world. That was condition 3. I know what condition 3 was." He held her eyes. "I broke condition 2. I ran a war behind your back and folded you into it and let your evidence carry my fingerprints and never told you until you'd already bled for it." He set the folder down on the low wall between them so it belonged to neither of them. "I mistook protection for control. With my sister. With you. I built a cage and called it a shield, and told myself the difference didn't matter, because the person inside was safe." He glanced at Yoon-ji, turning her pendant in the flat light. "She taught me the difference in a hallway this morning. Clean isn't hidden." "No," Simone said. "It isn't." "So I'm not going to keep you safe by keeping you small," he said. "I'm not going to owe you or be owed. You said no debt, no favor, name out. You get that. All of it. A breath. I'm apologizing for the rest, for treating a person as a tool because she was the clean thing I couldn't be. You were never my instrument. You were the only one in the room who acted for a reason that wasn't power." Simone thought of Chicago, of a dose she'd questioned and let go, of a man dead in bed 4 before morning, of the vow she'd carried across an ocean, to never again know and say nothing. She had come to Seoul to be a nurse who documented everything, and she had ended up in a mob war, and the scar was still the engine, and it had held. "I didn't do it for you," she said. "I did it because 6 years ago I stayed quiet and someone died, and I promised myself never again." Eun-ji was a patient. That's all she ever had to be for me to stand in that doorway. "I know," he almost smiled. "That's why it worked. A person who could be bought would have taken Han's deal on the first day." 3 weeks later, Simone walked back into Miran, through the front doors with a working badge. Not as chief surgical safety nurse, the hospital, gutted of its old leadership and desperate to prove it had changed, had done the one thing that cost them and helped her at once. They created a directorship, director of clinical safety, with authority the old nursing role never had. Independent reporting line, power to freeze a procedure, power to pull a login, a drawer nobody could reach into. The badge went green at the first reader she touched, and she stood there a moment and let it, because 2 days of red at every door teaches you not to take a green light for granted. Her first act as director was to rewrite the incident protocol so that no single account could ever delete a lab in a 90-second window again, and so that every safety report reached a court-appointed monitor before it reached any board. Her second act was to have the tox printer in the ward moved to a drawer that logged nothing and required no login, and to write into policy that it stay there. The thing that had saved a girl's life because it kept no record would now be protected precisely because it kept no record. She hired Bora onto the safety team, contract secured, name never on a log she didn't choose. The library desk was not allowed to accept a fee, so she sent one to the library itself, for the next person holding number 41. Yoon-ji went back to the conservatory. Her right hand closed on the keys without a shadow in it. She played Chopin at a winter recital, the pendant at her throat, and she testified twice more that season without her brother in the room, because she had decided she could be seen, and he had decided to let her. Min-jae came to the hospital once, at the end, to sign the last of the protection funding at the new director's desk, because she had insisted the money have a name and a purpose on the receipt, and she was the one who signed off on where it landed. He put the pen down. The dragon at his collar was covered, the way it was in daylight, in rooms where he was only a man doing paperwork. Director, he said. It was the first time he'd used the title. That's the name that stays, she said. Not yours, not owed, just the work. Just the work, he agreed. He stood. At the door he paused, not to control the moment, only to mark it. You kept every condition. I broke too. We came out even anyway. We came out even because you finally stopped protecting people by deciding for them, she said. That's the only way it was ever going to be even. He inclined his head, the small bow of one professional to another. No debt in it, no favor, no war. Then he left through the front doors she had once been locked out of, and she watched him go, and she turned back to a desk with her name on it, and a drawer that logged nothing, and a badge that stayed green. She had questioned a dose once and let it go, and a man had died. She had questioned a dose again, and this time she let nothing go, and a girl lived. A lie had a birthday, and the money had a name. She kept the receipts, always. If this story moved you, stop for a moment and reflect. Have you ever done your job the honest way and been slapped down for it, treated as invisible by the very people you were protecting? When you finally held the proof in your hands, did you speak or did you look away? And could you tell the difference between someone protecting you and someone controlling you? Tell us your experiences and feelings in the comments. We read them all. And if you believe in stories about truth, dignity, and justice, leave a like, be sure to subscribe to the channel, and click join to become a part of our community and help the channel.